Call the meeting to order for the March 8th, 2022 study session. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Thank you. We're now going to go on to current business. The first item is clarification for items on the consent calendar at the regular meeting. Do we have any consent calendar clarification issues? Mr. O'Neill? Mr. Duffield?
I have none.
Ms. Dixon?
I have none.
Mr. Brenner? Mr. Avery?
None.
Mr. Blom?
I have none.
I have none as well. Next item, we're going to recognize some local legends, Newport Beach's own freeway fighters. Councilman O'Neill, I believe you've done a little bit of background on this. You want to kick it off?
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Thank you all for being here. So I wanted to just kind of preface this by saying, so Bill Abdel, who's in the audience, is a former Daily Pilot editor and LA Times journalist who has a real passion for Newport Beach history. Some of you have probably listened to the podcast that he's created, which is really fun to consume. It's called Newport Beach in the Rearview Mirror. He has a great recent one where he's actually chronicling the Wedge and interviews local legend Tim Burnham. If you haven't heard that one, you definitely should check that one out. The reason we're here is because Bill and I spoke about honoring the subjects of one of his podcasts, which are called The Freeway Fighters. And last time I spoke about this history was actually on Duffy's last night as mayor of this great city. And I mentioned that Duffy's father, Marshall Duffield, was one of those freeway fighters. In fact, the charter amendment argument was actually signed by Marshall Duffield, Walter Koch, Margot Skilling, Carol Beek, and then Vice Mayor Howard Rogers. And so with that introduction, I know that Bill is going to expand on that. So Bill, if you want to come up and kind of expand on what I was just talking about, I certainly appreciate your being here. That one is probably easiest.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, thanks for the nice introduction, Councilman O'Neill. I've been in Newport Beach quite a while, and I had always been intrigued whenever I heard the story about a coastal freeway. To me, it didn't seem real. I'm a little too young to be here when that happened. So I have this podcast, so I decided to do a little bit of research and put together an episode on the coastal freeway, or the would-be coastal freeway. And once I started digging into that story, it was unbelievable. I couldn't believe, A, how insane the plan was and how insane that freeway route was, and B, that it was thought to be a fait accompli. It was like a done deal in most people's minds. So until the rise of the freeway fighters and Robert Kirchie there. So some quick background. A lot of this is covered in the proclamation, so I will not go into too much detail, but in 1970, the Newport Beach City Council voted 6-1 to an agreement with the state of California to build a freeway through Newport Beach. It would be 12 lanes in some places, and there'd be 5 level interchanges at West Coast Highway and Newport Boulevard, and East Coast Highway and MacArthur Boulevard. 5 level interchanges. It would have wiped out neighborhoods, hundreds of businesses, and for example, the freeway would have come up on the Westcliff neighborhood, wipe out all the homes on Kings Road and a lot more in Westcliff. It would have run right behind Corona Mar and 5th Street, across they would have a bridge across Buck Gully. It would just been a complete and utter disaster for Newport. And a little fun fact, after the podcast was aired, I got people recounting that their house was, the state had bought their house through eminent domain, and then a year after the freeway was done away with, they couldn't get the state to sell them back their houses. They had they went to auction and sold to the highest bidder. So just before the bulldozers could get started, the people of Newport Beach rose up, and one of those was Robert Kirchie here. He had moved to Harbor View Hill South in 1968, only to find very soon afterwards that this massive freeway was about to run through his backyard. I guess there wasn't that good of disclosures back in the day. So he and many others, including Councilman Duffield's father, band together under the name of Freeway Fighters to battle the freeway. They circulated petitions, mailed flyers, lobbied politicians from Washington, Sacramento, Santa Ana, and Newport, and those politicians didn't listen very well, and eventually collected enough signatures to get an initiative on the ballot that asked residents, one, should the freeway agreement with the state be voted down and rescinded, and two, should you amend the city charter so no freeway in the future could be built without a vote of the people? Not surprisingly, more than 80% of the voters said they wanted the freeway killed and a charter amendment passed, and that overwhelming sentiment stopped all momentum for the freeway, and soon afterwards, Governor Reagan cut all ties and said no more coastal freeways throughout the state of California. So, in my humble opinion, that proposed coastal freeway posed the greatest threat to the health of Newport Beach in our history. Oh yeah, I wasn't looking up there. And I'm personally so happy that the freeway fighters, including Robert Kirchie and their families, can be honored today, 50 years after the city of Newport Beach banned these freeways, and they helped save the city from an unnatural disaster. So I think Robert Kirchie wants to come up here and say a few words, so if he will, I'll turn it over to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to thank our mayor and members of this city council for honoring the freeway fighters of the 1970s, which led the successful effort to defeat a freeway that was proposed to go through our city 50 years ago. It is very special to me to be recognized as part of that group, to acknowledge their hard work and dedication for all of those involved in that very important fight. I would like to read some of the names that were involved in that effort, beginning with past mayors: Paul Gruber, Howard Rogers. Howard's son, Bob Rogers, is here today with his wife. I also want to recognize Peter and Carrie Britchker, who are here was here with their mother, Marit Storr. Marit's wife of John Storr, former city councilman, and my lost friend, has since passed away. Also, want to call to your attention Councilman Bill Agee. He was one of the freeway fighters as a councilman at that time. It's interesting to note that the founder of the freeway fighters was Marshall Duffield Sr. I knew him well, whose son sits before us today as a city councilman. I would also like to recognize Carol Beek from the Beek family, now deceased, who at that time was the source of strength to all of us to make this fight successful. I also want to recognize the following people who contributed to the writers group. Arvo Hoppe, who was the publisher of the Newport Harbor Ensign newspaper. He fought the Daily Pilot at that time, who were for the freeway, and Arvo Hoppe was the publisher of the local paper. Also, I want to recognize Walter Koch, Margot Skilling, Ward Baxter, Al Kelso, Mike Johnson. Thank you all for your attendance today and for honoring our efforts to stop this freeway that was supposed to go through our city. Thank you, gentlemen, and me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kirchie. So Neil, is there anything you wanted to add before I ask Councilman Duffield to say a couple words?
No, that was fun.
Great.
Thank you.
And real quickly, I think those 20% who voted against the initiative wants to work for Caltrans or been on the pilot payroll, because it's unbelievable. Mr. Duffield.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank everybody or Bill, for even bringing this up. I often wondered if this would ever happen. But I can tell you the things Bill may have left out. One was there's only one group in the history of the state of California to ever stop a freeway, only one other time. So when freeways were proposed, they were built. You didn't stop them. So that was a huge, huge thing you guys did. And it took 7 years. And so the 7-year part, my dad would go, you guys met at Hoag Hospital. Where are you going to? Every morning, I can't even tell you how many breakfasts at 7 in the morning to Hoag Hospital for 7 years. And to plot out a method of stopping it when there'd only been one before them was pretty daunting, to say the least. And I was in high school, I guess when they started, I was probably, I graduated in 70, so 7 years. There was a lot of discussion at a lot of dinner tables, a lot of breakfast tables where this was going to go on. It would have absolutely cut our city in half, because to get over to the other side, you would have had to take a submarine. I don't know how you get over there, but it wasn't very good. And then I'll leave you with this. Yes meant no. I remember the public was so confused because exactly what you said. You had the Daily Pilot and the Ensign, and I was a paper boy for both of them. But I remember the Ensign so vividly because they were, like you said, they were all against it and such. And then the Pilot was for it. So the public was getting this weird message, and it took so long they would forget. And there'd be times when everybody would, because there was a lot of voting, right? There was a lot of times when you had to vote for something to get to the next step, So people got so confused. My dad was so worried at the end. Yes meant no. And so that message alone, but seeing this, what are the results? It was a landslide victory. Yes, landslide. Really saved the day, because we were so concerned that nobody would understand what they were voting for by the time, right? Do you guys recall that issue? Okay. Well, anyway, it would have divided our city in half, no doubt, and all of those who saw that had great wisdom, and thank God they came through for us. That's what I have to say. Thank goodness. Thank you very much.
Power of the people.
Indeed, Mr. Duffield, thank you, and thank you to your father, Mr. Kersey, and the other individuals you named, and Bill for bringing the story to life again. I'm going to read the proclamation, and if you like, we can take some pictures up here with other members of the council, and then we'll move on to the less exciting business.
Kevin, could I add my thanks first before you do that? Because my parents and my house was a block and a half from where Oasis is now. And the Chamber of Commerce in Corona Del Mar, I remember they were business people in town, and Lavina Hayton and the Chamber group got behind this and all of your efforts, and they were part. I was still in school too, so I was too young to be involved at that point in time, but I remember all of the talk amongst the business people and everyone about how devastating this was going to be to us in Corona Del Mar. And so I really, and then I bought the house across the street, so I'm really grateful that you stopped that freeway, because it would be just a block and a half from my house if it existed now. So you did a great job, and you were kind of an inspiration for those of us that were younger, like Duffy and I, to see how you really could fight City Hall, or not, in this case, not City Hall, in this case, Sacramento, and be successful. So thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you. Yes, you fought a 6-1 council, is what some are saying up here on the dais, and you got the Gipper to get on board, which is pretty cool too. Okay, whereas in 1957, the state of California declared its plans to construct a freeway, 12 lanes at its widest, through the heart of Newport Beach. And whereas the coastal freeway would have wiped out hundreds of Newport Beach homes and businesses, created 5-level interchanges at 2 of the city's main intersections, and destroyed the unique character of our town. Whereas the Newport Beach City Council agreed to the coastal freeway plan in 1970 by a 6-1 vote. And whereas just before the bulldozers could be fired up, a group of Newport Beach residents were called freeway fighters, rose up to stop the freeway. And whereas the freeway fighters battled Washington, D.C., the state and city, eventually putting a referendum on the ballot to stop the freeway, which was approved by 85% of local voters. And whereas their unrelenting work resulted in Governor Ronald Reagan declaring in 1971 a permanent moratorium on freeway construction along the California coast, thus saving Newport Beach from great peril and many other communities, I might add. Now, therefore, I, Kevin Muldoon, Mayor of the City of Newport Beach, on behalf of the entire Newport Beach City Council, do hereby recognize the freeway fighters. If you like, we can take some pictures to memorialize the event.
Oh, they must be locked down.
You can go in front of the flag. That would be great. Thank you. Go ahead. Don't be shy. I need to get splashed up. And everyone. So I can see everyone. Oh, there we go. 1, 2, 3. One more. Another just in case. 1, 2, 3. Wonderful. Thank you.
I think we're going to have to do a group called Arena Fighters. And our job is to fight the destroying of our city with arena. The arenas are development numbers we have to build from Sacramento. So. All right, staff, on to item 3, capital improvement program.
And
Yes.
before we get started, I think there's some conflicts to be announced, and then people will leave the room if the particular item is discussed, but we'll go ahead and announce them all now.
Okay, Mr. O'Neill, do you have any conflicts? Mr. Duffield? Ms. Dixon?
None.
Ms. Brenner?
I do, but I forget what they are, Aaron. Can you tell me?
Right now.
Well, Mr. Avery?
None, thank you.
Mr. Blum?
Thank you. I have a conflict with the Balboa Island drainage with a business interest. I have a Balboa Island water main replacement with real property interest, and I have an assessment district of 111 with a real property interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harp, do you can do Ms. Benners?
Yeah, so Grant Howard Park rehabilitation based on real property interests, and sewer and storm drain systems rehabilitation based on real property interests. And I also believe Lonnie, the city clerk, has a conflict regarding Balboa Boulevard crosswalk improvement, 28th and 26th Streets, regarding real property interests.
Thank you. And I have, go ahead, Ms. Benner.
I think there's one more that you gave me, Aaron, that said the accessory dwelling unit
That's on the regular agenda.
on the regular, okay.
And I'd like to announce my conflicts. I have one on Grant Howell Park Rehabilitation because it involves installation of wireless communications, and I have business interests in that region or that sector, as well as assessment districts, all included 21, 111, 113, and 117 for the same reason. Fire station number 2 for the same reason. Advanced media and infrastructure for the same reason. Streetlight rehabilitation program for the same reason, and traffic signal rehabilitation program for the same reason, because in these projects, communication backbone or devices could be used in the installation or to benefit communication companies. Is that it, Mr. Sharp?
Yep, that's all of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Mr. Webb, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. Excited to come to you today to talk about our proposed capital improvement plan for next year. This is what we do, our traditional early look. As you recall, we've been building consensus on various projects. We've had your planning session, the finance committee's met, we've looked at various master plans, we've had voices from the community bring forth projects. So tonight, Jim Houlihan, our city engineer deputy director, is going to go through how we've assembled the capital improvement project for your review. After that, get some comments from you and the public, and then we'll move towards publish of the draft CIP for May. So I'm going to turn over to Mr. Houlihan.
All right. Good afternoon. So moving right into it. So each year we look at the goals for allocation to the CIP, and a little bit different this year. The first item for sure is continuing what we've done in the past, is focusing the resources to maintain and replace existing infrastructure and keep it in good working condition. The second item, we've added another $1 million to our baseline general fund from the surplus, and investing it toward the citywide infrastructure maintenance repair. And then the third item, a big change. Typically we had about $1.5 million in this fund, the neighborhood enhancement. This year we're putting another $13 million toward it. So that's for the funding of specifically streets, drainage, traffic, landscape enhancement projects. And we'll see those as we walk through it. And then the continued investment in Newport Harbor, the parks, the streets, and the replacement or rehabilitation of the public buildings. So how the projects are selected for the CIP, we have master plans. We have multiple master plans that we update regularly. You can see them there. There's identified or requested projects by the community, the council, and all the departments. So I meet with all the departments. We go through all their potential needs and potential CIP projects. We do that in November and December, and then we start putting this together. And then also to support the city council goals and objectives. And finally, there are some that are required by federal, state, or legal action. To touch back on some of the projects, little look back, projects that we recently completed. These 10 represent about $17 million. I'll touch on a few. Grand Howell Park, great project we completed last summer, or maybe it was in spring. It was well done and well received by the public. The Violito Sudin Nord water main replacement. We're now getting into the pavement project, and I'll cover that as well. Big Canyon Restoration, Phase 2A. That was funded entirely through state grants. And then Assessment District 117 in Corona del Mar was a big accomplishment to get that completed. And then projects that are currently in construction, these 10 represent about $34 million that we're working on right now, some of the major ones. So Fire Station number 2, as you know, that's scheduled to be complete in June. East Coast Highway Pavement Rehab, that's due to be completed in May. And Violito Sudin Nord Pavement Rehabilitation, they're working on that right now, as I mentioned, and that's due to be complete in late April. And then, as you can see, the little picture down in the right bottom corner, that's a new vista point on Ocean Boulevard at Dahlia. And that all the concrete improvements done, and we're just finishing up on some landscaping there. But it turned out to be really nice. So last year, our CIP was approximately $75 million. And this year, we're looking at $98.5 million, a large increase. And that is due to that surplus. The new funding, $65.5 million, and rebudget of approximately $33 million. That number is based on assumptions as of July 1 as we get closer. These 7 projects that are listed here represent about 70% of the rebudget. And these are, a couple of these are coming on soon. Superior Avenue, Pedestrian Bridge, and the American Legion Bulkhead. Those are coming soon. The others, a lot of the others are in design. So I'm going to move right into the new projects. And these are projects with new proposed funding. Some have rebudgeting. I'll cover just a few on each page, and so stop me if you want to go over any others that are on the page. So I'll start with the Central Library Lecture Hall. So this is the funding that total, both city and contribution, we're putting into the CIP. And of course, we still need to get the contribution, but that is the total of what we're looking at. And we're looking, this design is underway right now, and by the end of summer, we should be done with the design. So we'll be looking to see where that contribution is, if we're ready to go, because there are stipulations. I know, part of the MOU to discuss where we are, and I think there's some milestones to meet to continue on that. Junior Lifeguard Building, the other big project, that one is in front of the Coastal Commission tomorrow. So that's a big day for that project, and we'll see how that goes.
Do we have any intel?
We, there weren't too many negative comments from NIMBY, kind of, the people who are in the view plane, but we've agreed to all their conditions. We've been able to move forward, and they're supportive to move forward. At least the staff. We haven't talked to the commissioners, so it looks positive.
Great. Yes, Councilwoman Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. I didn't realize this. Now, we've been working, so the supporters, the community members who are supportive of this, are they aware of the Coastal Commission? Are they planning to be there, or is it necessary, or?
Yeah, the foundation will be there, and,
Okay.
and they'll have a short little stint in the presentation
Okay.
on our side.
All right. As long as I have the microphone, just for the community's edification, rebudgeting in your parlance means carryover from prior year?
That's right.
It's just so people understand what that means.
That's right.
Okay, thanks. It's not like the budget went up or something. It's just a carryover.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Also, noting on the facility maintenance master plan, this typically has been at 1.5 million, and moving forward, we're looking to increase that to 2.5. There is a lot of major maintenance that we're doing on the facilities as they age, and they aren't separate CIPs. We roll them into that FMMP, we call it, and so, air conditioning and coolers and chillers and all that kind of stuff. So we've got a lot of that coming, and we recently had an assessment done on all the buildings. So we have a nice big list of things that need to keep getting updated. So that's been it will be very helpful moving forward and taking a lot of that off our plate. It'll be good.
Or Dave or Jim, have we seen the final plan for the parking lot? I don't remember seeing that. I mean, I saw early plans, like 3 or 4 months ago. Has it changed since then, how you're reconfiguring the Balboa Pier parking lot?
If you saw an early one where it was a bunch of little spots, it's changed. So we're focusing it on the main entry.
Yes.
So that main entry will change. We're taking out the buildings that are in there.
Good.
And simplifying that main entry. It won't be a long neck like it is today, where you have to go all the way to the end to get into the parking lot.
I knew we were going to be space neutral because we weren't losing parking, but are we gaining any parking?
We are. with one of the conditions, which was EVs, will probably about 3 to 4 gain overall. So we're at 6, but I think with the condition, we're probably back to 4.
I think that plan's gone to PBNR, Jim. It's going to go to Coast Commission. They'll see the plan, correct? But
That's
maybe
right.
we could, you could just PDF it to the council just so
Yeah.
they can see what it's kind of per your approval, but we want to make sure you have it. And I think we have a website version too. We can make sure the public sees
Well,
it.
good. And then we could communicate to the, I mean, we just had a town hall, we didn't say anything, but of course the council hadn't seen it. So the next town hall, we should
Sure.
tell people in District 1 what's going on. Okay, thanks.
Very good. Okay, and then the remainder of the facilities, Balboa Library, Fire Station number 1. So we're moving on to another fire station. So we'll be working on, starting this design this summer, and it's concept. And then the construction for this is slated for fiscal year 24-25. So this is just the design funds for that. So in total, we're looking at approximately $28 million in facility, new money for facilities. On the street and drainage side, some of the big ones, Balboa Boulevard, Newport Boulevard, pavement rehab. So this is the pavement on Balboa from Coast Highway to 12th Street, and on Newport from 30th to McFadden Square. With this project and a couple others you'll see in here, within a few years we'll have the entire length of Balboa Boulevard, the peninsula, repaved. So all of the asphalt pavement will be redone, so for the whole length. The drainage project, the Balboa Island Master Plan of Drainage and Pump Station, we're adding $5 million to that project, which is a huge investment toward this project. And over the next few years, we'll hopefully be budgeting additional money. The total project's anywhere from $12 to $14 million for the entire drainage project. But the pump station, that is slated for fiscal year 24-25. It's in design now and moving forward, and as well as the drainage layout for the west end of the island. The Collins Island Bridge, that one's tied to this drainage project because it's right there where the pump station will be at the end of Park Avenue. So that project, we're moving forward, and we want to get that built, raise up that end of the island, the street down there, and the bridge that goes across to Collins, and that will be tied, like I said, tied into our pump station, where the outfalls will be for the pump station. So it's critical we get that moving forward, get that design, get that built, and then we'll be following that right with the pump station and then the piping system.
Councilman Avery.
The bridge, basically it's replacement, right?
That's right.
And it's happening because of the drainage project?
Yeah.
More or less?
More or less.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was built in '53, that bridge. There was one way before that, made out of wood, I think, but anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And real quick, Jim, just if I can, on the very top of that list, you'll notice alley reconstruction. Just for those who are asking, at the end of the assessment districts, we've done a lot on the peninsula. We've torn up those alleys, so there's a lot of work that's going to be happening to replace those for those who are waiting. You'll also note that a lot of that funding is not general fund. There's a little general fund in there, but those are the assessment district funds, water funds, and others that have actually impacted the alley, just for folks' knowledge.
Some of the other large street roadway projects, another East Coast Highway pavement project. So the other portion that we control from Jamboree to MacArthur, we'll be doing the design next year and the pavement the following year. And just as a side note, so we're doing the East Coast Highway now, that segment to Jamboree, and Caltrans is moving forward with their grind and overlay from Jamboree to the river. So within the next few years, the entire length of Coast Highway will be repaved. So it'll be nice to have a nice new fresh road all the way through the city. In our landscape enhancement program, we're hitting quite a few little areas here. Newport Boulevard median, that's a area that we've been struggling with on keeping it watered and making it, we need to get that looking fresh, and we'll also be looking on the sides of the roads and working in that area. West Coast Highway and the Santa Ana River area near the trailer park down at the end there. We've talked about this in the past, putting some landscaping in that area, some trees. And then 30th and Lake, Ms. Dixon has brought that up a few times. We added that to our list, like that. And then there's other things that come up every year, and this allows us to hit those, as Mr. Avery said, Councilmember Avery, the blisters. This helps us hit those. Newport Coast Drive, Balboa Boulevard pavement rehab, those two items. As I mentioned, the other part of Balboa Boulevard here is Medina to G. So that'll grind and overlay through the village, and that one piece that from 12th to Medina is we're working on right now with the median improvement, and we'll be working on the pavement in that area. And then Newport Coast Drive will be from Coast Highway to Vista Ridge. Let's see, and then got quite a few more. The Slurry Seal program, that's part of our 8-year cycle. That will be the CDM Conomar south of Coast Highway. And with that, we'll also have our concrete program, and I'll have our street pavement repair program for those areas that are needing more repair, dig outs all the way down to the rock and the dirt. We'll do the street pavement repair. There's quite a few areas that typically need that. So those funds will help take care of that on the street pavement repair. And then Streetlight Rehabilitation program, we're going to focus on replacing streetlights, the actual streetlights in the Newport Center Drive area, the loop. A lot of those white poles are getting deteriorated over time, and they need replacement. Currently, we're working in Harbor Hills and handling the last conversion for the city. So now we're going to start focusing on streetlight replacement. So that's our first project there to take care of those. And in total, we're looking at a little over $23 million for the streets and drainage. On the traffic and transportation side, there's some other projects that are purely rebudget projects, but this is a new funded project, and every year we have a traffic signal rehabilitation program. This year we put a little bit more into this project, and we're hitting a lot more areas. The signals in the airport area, that's ahead of a future pavement project in the airport area, and we're adding fiber optic communications in the Newport Center Drive and Balboa Peninsula areas, where we now have some conduit. So now we need to add the fiber optics for our communication for our signals. And then on Balboa Peninsula, we'll be adding a new dynamic messaging sign on that roadway. It's a sign. There used to be one. It came down some years ago. We're putting up a new one.
I didn't hear the first part.
It's a dynamic messaging sign, so you can add text to it to inform visitors and such.
Would help with summer traffic control and parking, and it's right about 26th Street, if I recall.
On the water quality and environmental side of the business, Big Canyon is a big focus. Still, this $225,000 is the remainder, the last year, 2 years and a half of monitoring and reporting that isn't covered by the grant. The grant is completed in the next year or so, and so we have a longer period to have to maintain it. So this is what that covers. And then this phase 3 is a project in an area owned by the Department of Fish and Wildlife, but we've agreed to take the lead on the environmental, help them out, and also will provide support in the permitting and design side of it. And again, there's zero there, but it's staff time, so there is a cost to us, definitely.
Councilmember Brenda, this is the area the vector control folks really have a concern of mosquitoes, that state vector pond. So the city's stepping forward with staff to do it because they can't process the project. They want staff to help them.
Diane and I were at ACCOC in Sacramento yesterday, meeting with lobbyists and all kinds of people, and they were talking about the amount of state money that there is right now, that all the legislators are looking at things they can fund right now. So do we need to be asking them for any money for Big Canyon 3, Phase 3?
So the design is funded.
Okay.
And they're working with Newport Bay Conservancy. So they were already the Fish and Wildlife were already working with them.
Okay.
They had concerns moving forward for them. If they were to be the lead of that effort, they would have to take away the consultant that Newport Bay Conservancy is already using. It was really confusing with the grant, and they would have to then throw it to some of their consultants, which is very confusing. They didn't have time. Those people were busy. It would be put on the shelf for a while. So they asked us to take the lead, and Newport Bay Conservancy can continue their efforts with their consultant. So we're able to keep moving forward. Again, no funds other than our staff time, which is not cheap.
Right, right.
But anyway, moving forward.
As far as any additional funding they need for that, though, it would be through the Conservancy that they would be
Getting the
asking our
grants.
and the
Yeah.
grants, okay.
Again, state money.
Yes.
So exactly what you're talking about for the
Okay.
construction and final design, those type of things.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, good, thank you.
Just a quick question. Following up on Ms. Brenner's comment, we did indeed hear that from members of the state budgeting office, the controller's office, that are we aware of, there's a deadline in the next 30 days, I believe, that all local government applications need to be in. This is federal money from the infrastructure bill, I guess, that is coming to the state, and it's part of the budget surplus, and actually, this was the whole discussion about where is the state budget surplus going, the $50 to $60 billion, and a large portion is being allocated for infrastructure improvement at the local level. So are we aware of that? You guys are always on top of these things, I assume you are, but there is a 30-day deadline, I believe.
So I've seen various items come through. I haven't seen specific proposals for city-driven funds. Usually it comes through Caltrans or OCTA, one of our partners for transportation funding. We can look at that. Again, I guess we're not getting state refund checks then. So we're going to be building things.
Sadly.
But that's, we'll be looking for that. I'm hoping they've contacted us. Again, I don't know how much program money is available for cities, but
We have the contact information for Betty Yee's office, the two people that spoke to us, if we can give that to you and see what you can find out.
pass it on, we'll contact them.
Okay.
Yeah. So moving on to the parks, harbors, and beaches. For the parks section, Royal Park synthetic turf, we're adding synthetic turf to that field. Currently grass field, so that'll be a huge improvement and add additional days, rain day, whatever, to that field. We'll be able to program that much more. And then the last one, there's Superior Pedestrian Bridge and Parking Lot. That's the remaining fees or funding needed to complete the funding for that project. And we're looking forward to award that this summer. So we're moving forward with that, got Coastal Commission approval, and we're just working on some of the last condition items that they had conditioned us with.
Built off-site and then just brought to
Tom? Nope. On the harbors and beaches side of it, we're going to start with the Balboa Yacht Basin design for the docks. That is a facility that's a little over 35 years old and reaching the end of its useful life. And so we're going to start working on the design and in the future years, the funding for the redevelopment of that, the dock areas. Eelgrass and the Callirpa survey, that is something we do every 2 years. And I just asked Chris Miller, I said, anything specific on Callirpa? And he said, we always look for it. So he just added it to this just because it's been an issue in the more recent history. And then the last item, Harbor Public Piers Rehabilitation. We're looking at 10 public piers in the harbor, redoing the floats, adding some tie-up space to those, and redoing the gangways. They all need a refresher. So the total for parks and harbors and beaches is around $6 million.
Just a quick question. Not all of them. The public pier at Central Avenue or in Lido, that was just installed like 3 years ago?
This is 10 of them. There's,
There are
I
more.
don't know how many.
I
15,
want to say
20.
15.
So that
maybe.
wasn't included, you're not doing all of them?
This
that's-
is the original
Right.
ones.
We're doing 10,
All
which
right.
need them.
Okay.
Ones that haven't been touched recently.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, thanks.
Yeah. On the water improvements, couple items here. The Balboa Island water main replacement. This is one water line that in the phase 3, not the whole phase 3 project, because that's coming up in future years. But there's one water line in the first alley behind, just off of Marine Way or Marine Avenue. Because of the future undergrounding, we needed undergrounding of the overhead. We needed to get this water line in ahead of time. So that's why this project, or this smaller phase 3 project's occurring next year. Hillsboro Water Pump Station Rehabilitation. That's a pump station that's in spyglass, and it pumps up to the highest elevations of our water system. So it's in need of upgrades, and so staff has said we've had that on for a while. We need to get to it and redo some of the pumps and motors and that type of thing in there. The West Irvine Terrace water main replacement. So this is a 70-year-old line in the neighborhoods, and it has been prone, because of the material it's made out of, it's been prone to breaks in the past. So we're getting in there next year. It's been designed, and we're going to get in there and replace that water line. On the wastewater side, the big focus will be on the Ford Road pump station down off of Bonita Creek Road, Bonita Canyon Road down there. And in the future, when we replace the Collins Bridge, we'll be going after that, the pump station on Collins Island and doing some improvements there. And the miscellaneous items is the general plan. We'll be adding some funding to the general plan update.
Ms. Brenner, do you have something?
Sorry, I had a question about the work that's being done between Bayside and PCH on Jamboree. Was that a water line break?
Not a break.
What?
Not a break. It was a upgrade that
was a
needed to be done.
scheduled
Yes.
replacement? Okay, good. That's good to know. Because my concern was, I know we had the water main in Shore Cliffs a couple of years
Yes.
ago that broke. And how do you fund those things when they come up? I know you're planning ahead and you know the ones that are old and that you're planning to replace, but when something happens out of the normal schedule like that, do you have a fund that you go to, or do you move projects around? How do you handle that when it's unexpected?
There's probably a series, and Mark Vukoyevich could hit that, but the utilities department has a certain amount of money for main breaks, and they have responses. If it's something bigger that needs some follow-up, sometimes the CIP has some miscellaneous water main money. And if it's beyond that, we're probably going to come to council if we need to do something major and say we're going to have to do some, hundreds of thousands of dollars or something like that. So that's kind of the train of funding. Most of it's going to handle on the emergency side with the utilities department. Just on that note, I would say the Jamboree water line we just talked about, there's going to be some major work tonight and tomorrow. So we expect a little more traffic delays. We're really pushing on it. They're going to be right out in the intersection. The valve they're working on is right in the middle of the Jamboree intersection with Coast Highway, which used to be the shoulder when Coast Highway was a small little tank road. Now it's in the middle of the road. So we're going to be working out there and expect a little delay on that note.
And I don't know if the picture was circulated, but there was a photo of them cutting down to get to the water line, and it was 3 feet of concrete. I mean, it was some ridiculous amount of structure down there.
It's called the concrete tank road that's still underneath the highway out there.
Ms. Dixon?
So the proposed summary of next year's new funding is listed here. And you can see the larger Neighborhood Enhancement Fund, the FFP with some contributions to that, or actually the grants and contributions are on the last line. But a lot of funding to infrastructure and facilities on that FFP line. So a total of approximately $65.5 million in proposed funding, new funding.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Councilwoman Dixon.
Okay, a couple questions. It would be helpful if you broke down the source, the external source. Is any of this coming, we knew we had a surplus, so a lot of this is coming from, not necessarily external, but the $30 million surplus is that's what's funding. So we should acknowledge that. And so the result is a $65 million capital program this year, which is significantly more than in prior years?
Yeah.
So from a human resource standpoint, how are you going to handle all that?
It's a good question, as you know, we kind of, the philosophy is staff for the valleys, to make sure we always have the work, but all the other work goes out to the consultant pools. We still have to manage the consultants, so we will be a little stretched. We hope to run really efficient, and I think Jim and his group do a good year, but we're going to be pressed. There's a lot of work here. Luckily, a lot of this, the design, like for instance, there's big dollars in the harbor, which has already been designed and ready to go. There's big dollars in the lecture hall, which is just about done. Big dollars in the fire station. So some of the big projects are kind of teed up, so you're going to spend a lot of money.
But there's always staff time. I mean, there's always a project
always staff
engineer who's involved. So
You'll
why?
see.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you'll see more consultants coming on board. For instance, what's the one we're coming in next one with Ardura? We're going to do, the construction management of the bridge that's coming up in Sunset View Park and the park itself. We'll be hiring consultants. Big dollars you'll see, but a lot of consultants will be needed to do that.
So whether it's internal or consultants, I mean, somebody's got to manage all of this.
That's right.
Why are you putting it all in this year? You can't spread it out over 2 years?
Well, we do have, and you'll see the CIP has a 5-year plan after that,
Right.
and there's a lot of money. It just keeps coming. So there is some big injections, as you see. The neighborhood enhancement is $14.5 million. We added money to the general fund. The other thing we can do is sometimes if we expand the projects, instead of a lot of little projects, we do more bigger pavement projects. We get a little more bang for our buck that way. On staff time, there's one manager still just running a bigger project. So.
Well, you're using your own words. You're going to be stretched. So
We're going to be
I mean,
stretched.
if you lose somebody, it's really going to be a tough time. I'm glad I have no specific issue with any of the projects. I think it's fantastic that we as a city can afford to do them. We have the good fiscal management with the $30 million surplus. We've gotten some external funds. And obviously, as you've identified the external source of funds, your department is the best to go after state and county, federal funds. That's fantastic because the general fund does not really fund a lot of this except the $30 million surplus. Just that there's a lot. And so compared to prior years, you've got a great team. I'm just saying, be careful. And I'm sure you'll manage it well. Thank you.
Mr. Blum.
Just a quick comment. And thank you guys for this. I think nothing better than an ambitious program. We have a lot of work to do in this city, and I think that's actually number one. And if we can allocate the resources to do the work, thank you guys for stepping up to the plate to actually make that happen. I think that's number one. There's never going to be enough people to execute everything we want to do. And I think we've seen that a lot of these projects and a lot of things we put forth the idea for roll over into multiple years because that's just the nature of doing projects, that sometimes everything we strike for 1 year might take a little bit longer. And I'm so impressed with the ability for us to get these things underway and to keep moving the city forward. And I think we all know when we drive on Newport Beach city streets. I think it's very understandable that this is a different city than a lot of other places. And so taking on a larger cut of what we have to do this year so that we can take on more next year is really the goal I think we're looking for from everyone. And so commendable, amazing, and thank you guys for what you've done.
Thank you. Okay, see no other comments from the dais?
I have a few more slides.
Oh, you do? I'm
Just
sorry.
looking forward, the five-year look ahead real quick. These are some of the projects coming forward, and these are construction start dates for the fiscal year. So 23, 24, some of those big projects some of the designs actually occurring now, the Collins Island Bridge, moving into 15th Street, East Coast Highway pavement, and looking forward to the bigger dredging project, and then working on the Balboa Yacht Basin in that area, to dredge that area and include it in that project. And then in 24, 25, we're starting on that, the pump station on the island, and the library and fire station, some of the other big projects there. And then 25, 26, continuing with the drainage project and some large concrete projects down at the end of the peninsula. Finish off the concrete roads down there. And in 26, 27, I think the big one there is the Newport Pier. Ambitious.
Well, and to your point about staffing, well, these projects may change. Truthfully, we plan out, and that's the wonderful thing about this council in the city. Your plans, and you're able to look forward. And we'll move that. We'll come to you next year and say, we're just not able to get to some of this stuff. You know, and there's always that decision of what we don't do. We hear from the public, we really need the lecture hall, okay, or the junior guard building. Those go up front, and some other projects might get pushed back. So that's kind of the balance we're always running here. But I'm a big believer in keep the hopper full. That means no one standing around because there's always back pressure of stuff coming down the line. So we'll take your comments if you want this time.
Any other comments from the dais? All right, see now, let's go out to the public.
Oh, wait. I just didn't push the button fast enough. I had a question about where does the funding for the new Balboa Island benches come from?
From you. So, that discussion is ongoing, and when that comes forward, we'll be bringing that recommendation. There'll probably be a recommendation for funding on that, or if it comes out of the current budget. We haven't even got to the funding yet. It's going to this PBR commission probably in May for discussion on what they want to advise you on their solution.
So we don't have any money set aside for something like that?
Not particularly. I'd work with Grace, city manager, and the finance director when we get to that. We have to know the number, and then we'll go back and figure out how to fund it.
Okay. And I had one other question about, hold on. Oh, I wanted you to repeat what you said at the last meeting, Dave, because it was in response to a question I asked, but it was just said kind of offhandedly, and I think it's important for the public to understand, and it was where you had given the numbers that it costs when we re-slurry a street versus the time when we actually have to break down and repave the street. And I think it's because a lot of people will say things to me about, well, there's nothing wrong with our streets, so why are we going through all of this aggravation with this? But I thought that was a really important point that you made, so I wanted you to really emphasize it so people understood.
I think was I the one that said that? Maybe not. It has to do with preventive maintenance. In the world of asphalt pavement, it's a lot cheaper to keep up with your preventive maintenance than to rebuild your streets. So, for instance, our slurry, I'm just going to use some numbers. I don't know what, about 20 cents a square foot or something like that. We slurry streets. It's a preventive thing. It keeps the water from going down, deteriorating the streets. Then we get into like a minor overlay, and that gives it a wearing surface and prolongs the life of that street. The last thing you want to do is get that street down where it's basically rubble. It's broken up. It's alligatored. Because now you're just in a replacement cycle, and the number for replacement in comparison might be $5 to $7 a square foot. And when you can really prolong the life of your pavement. Eventually, maybe in 50, 100 years, you'll get there. But if you can prolong it, you're going to save money in the long run. The other side of that is concrete streets. They're much more expensive up front. Our neighbors really like those, particularly in the water-prone areas like Balboa Island, where you get a lot of water, which deep breaks down asphalt concrete. The concrete streets tend to last a long time, but you do pay a little more up front.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Public comments, please come forward.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. I have two quick comments. First, regarding the junior lifeguard proposal that is going to the Coastal Commission tomorrow. I don't know if it was clear from the back and forth, but tomorrow's Coastal Commission meeting, like all of their meetings for the last 2 years, is totally virtual. So anybody who wants to can watch it and actually comment when the item comes up. All they have to do is visit the Coastal Commission website, coastalca.gov. Although you have to follow the agenda because you can't predict what time of day that particular item will be coming up. But in the broadcast, they do show what item they're on, and you can follow the agenda that way. And then the second comment, at the very beginning and the very end of the presentation, we heard how the CIP program is driven by a number of long-range plans that we have. First and foremost among them is the facilities financing plan, which we heard is updated yearly. And I just wanted to point out that the city's finance department has a link to the FFP, but when one clicks on the link, the copy what gets, it says that it was last updated January 30th, 2019. That's 3 years ago. So if it has been updated 3 times since then, it would probably be good to put a current copy at that link so that the public can see what the current plan is. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Curran. I live in Corona Del Mar. First, I wanted to ask Jim, thank you for the overview. I wasn't sure, who were the NIMBYs you were referring to? That was a question I had. And for the public, how much of this plan will be reviewed in other committees, such as tomorrow, the March 10th Finance Committee meeting, which is generally at 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. at City Hall? So for residents, this is not the only opportunity, I would say, to learn about these projects. If you have interest, go to the Finance Committee meeting, go to Planning Commission and ask, more questions. So, and finally, I would say on the Newport Boulevard landscaping, really encourage things that reduce the amount of times that we have to go out and do landscaping maintenance, because honestly, I'm scared to death every time I drive down MacArthur, which is a 55-mile-an-hour rated street, or Newport, and I see staff members perched on the edge of the curb to trim a bush. And I think there's got to be better ways to do maintenance than to put people in the middle of freeway speeds. So that would be my encouragement on the capital project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Okay, seeing none, just for the record, I stepped out when items I had conflicts on arose. And do I have any requests to speak on the dais? Great. Thank you, staff. Great presentation. So now we'll do public comments on agenda and non-agenda items. Please come forward. Okay, seeing none, Mr. Harp, do you have a closed session announcement?
I do. Thank you, Mayor Muldoon. The City Council will adjourn to closed session to meet with the...
I have a public comment on a non-agenda item. Sorry. But other members of the public were coming up first.
Sure.
I just wanted to share that last Thursday I had the opportunity at the Board of Supervisors to attend a hearing on fentanyl distribution in Orange County. And it was convened by Supervisor Foley with the participation of Assemblymember Cotty Petrie Norris and Senator Pat Bates, and the Sheriff Don Barnes and the Chief of Police of the City of Costa Mesa. And I just wanted to mention that the reason they convened this hearing is that fentanyl is the #1 killer of young people. And they talked about how 2 grams of fentanyl can provide enough doses, 200 doses, to kill people. And that 1 pill can kill. So I bring this up because so the public is aware that this is a topic that is being addressed, first of all. That it's affecting our police officers, because in Costa Mesa, they were doing arrests and 2 police inhaled grams of, or fumes of fentanyl and became ill. So when we as residents, hear about these hearings, it's a great opportunity to learn about the subject and about the ties, the issues that it brings up in our community. And I also point out that fentanyl is easily distributed through a drug pipeline from Mexico, and it's deadly. So when we as residents talk about drug treatment, residential facilities, and being vigorous in enforcing regulation and good treatment in sober living homes and in licensed facilities, and pursuing efforts with the Department of Social Services and the Department of Healthcare Services about making sure that responsible rehabs are operating. Part of the reason we do that is because when we're not assertive with our legislators, and it's hard. Diane Dixon and Joy Brenner will tell you it's hard to go and have these meetings and to make the calls. When we're not assertive, it makes people that manufacture fentanyl and bring it into our cities and let our children buy it on social media think that it's okay. So I want to bring to the attention the great work that they did, and I'm sure that John Lewis is aware of this particular hearing because he has a close relationship with the chief in Costa Mesa, and that he is planning on, he's addressing this issue. But I want to thank the supervisors as well for hosting the hearing, and thank you for your interest.
I'm sorry about that, Mr. Harper. Would you please continue?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Muldoon. The City Council will adjourn a closed session to meet with the city's labor negotiators regarding negotiations with the Newport Beach Police Management Association, the Newport Beach Lifeguards Management Association, the city clerk, and the city attorney. All is set forth under agenda item number 4A and B, and the city clerk and city attorney will recuse themselves from that, the second item, 4B.
Thank you. We are recessed until 5:30 for the regular session and council redistricting MAC public hearing. Call the meeting to order for the March 8, 2022 Council Redistricting Map Public Hearing and Regular Meeting. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
The record will reflect that all members of council are present.
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Is there a closed session report?
Thank you, Mayor Muldoon. There's no closed session report this evening.
Great. Now it's time for invocation. We have a guest, Reverend Susan B. Pinkerton of St. Michael and All Angels Episcopalian Church. Reverend? Episcopal Church, excuse me.
Let us pray. God, Lord of all creation, lover of life and everything, please help us to love in our very small way what you love infinitely and everywhere. We thank you that we can offer just this one prayer, and that will be more than enough, because in reality, everything and everyone is connected, and nothing stands alone. To pray for one part is really to pray for the whole, and so we do. Help us each day to stand for love, for healing, for the good, for the diverse unity of all our citizens and all creation, because we know this is what you desire. We pray you send down upon the members of the City Council of Newport Beach the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all people. We offer our prayer together with all the names that are holy of God. Amen. I would also like to offer this prayer that I received from a missionary in Ukraine. It seems very appropriate. Dear friends and brothers and sisters from different parts of our world, we turn to you in this dark time for all of us, when black clouds from explosions cover the sun over our capital. Elite special forces of the Russian Federation, together with Chechen units, storm one of the oldest and most beautiful cities in the world, the spiritual capital of Eastern Europe, the city of Kyiv. With tears in our eyes, we ask you, no matter what time zone you are in, to spend all this time fasting and praying to God. Please send this message to all your friends and family and friends in Europe, Asia, and America around the world. Prayer is stronger than the strongest enemy. With love and hope in the Lord, your brothers and sisters from Ukraine. Amen.
Amen. Councilmember Blom, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pleasure. Right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to take this council meeting a little out of its regular order by first conducting the public hearing. This is regarding City Council redistricting. Staff?
Thank you, Mayor Muldoon and City Council members. Simone Georges, your Community Development Director. With me is Daniel Campanolo. He is our Systems and Admin Manager. So we have just a very brief presentation on the council redistricting map. So if you recall, we were with you about a month ago on February 8th, and we talked about through a study session this particular map. And the council was unanimous about supporting this, what we called Map 1. But when we drafted our ordinance, we realized, and you could see it on the screen in front of you, that red circle, you see the District 5, there has like a little tail that kind of bleeds into District 6. And that's the only area that we saw that we had this kind of awkward blending of the two districts. We wanted to kind of remove that tail and just make it very, very clean for District 6. So we did talk to our ad hoc committee members, which was Councilmember Diane Dixon, Brad Avery, and Will O'Neill. And so this is kind of a close-up of what we talked about, that tail from District 5 that blends into District 6. And in our proposal, from a staff standpoint, we thought it would be better, we just split it and make it cleaner. And our ad hoc committee members thought that was appropriate. And so we wanted to make sure that the city council was comfortable with this too. From a population standpoint, it all works out. We worked with our consultant, and we believe that we have a very consistent district map. And here's that final map where District 5 is very clean, District 6 is very clean, and we removed that tail. And that is what is before you this evening, and we're happy to answer any questions for the council.
Excellent. Do we have any questions from the dais? Okay, I'm seeing none. Let's go out for the public hearing component. Public comments, please come forward.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. First of all, when the ad hoc committee was formed, I thought the understanding was it was going to hold all of its meetings in public, so I'm rather surprised that they gave you some private advice. And I was hoping I could spend the 3 minutes here to explain to you why I think Newport Beach should completely do away with its districts, but instead it's, I think, going to take the full 3 minutes to explain why what the staff has come up with needs some fine-tuning if you're going to introduce an ordinance that will serve us well for the next 10 years and be logically consistent. First of all, I'd call your attention to the fact that the proposed ordinance is logically inconsistent. This is Exhibit C from the ordinance. Staff has told you that first of all, a number of problems have been introduced because instead of just describing the boundaries of the district, the staff has chosen to use census blocks, which is a new idea for Newport Beach. This exhibit supposedly says to remove the tail, which they're not removing entirely. One map makes it look like it, but it's not. That they only need to split one census block, which is called 1023. I sent you an exhibit in my written comment from the Census Bureau website. There is a census block here, but there's another census block that comes up here and wraps down that way. And that number is 1024. If you're not splitting that as well, this area down here, and it goes all the way down to Big Corona Beach, would continue to be yellow. And if you go to attachment C to the staff report, you will see a map, and it has little things sticking out here, which it claims are in District 6. That census block wraps all the way around here. So those little tails that stick out, the properties would be divided, and they would be partly in District 6 and partly in District 5. Moreover, by going to census blocks, a number of strange things have happened. I don't know if any of you have actually looked at the list, which is attached Exhibit B of the ordinance, but the very first census block that's in that, if you look up on the Census Bureau map where it is, it's a 23 square mile area off the coast of Newport Beach. In fact, the entire length of Newport Beach, which is entirely assigned to District 1. We've never had districts assigned that way in the past, and then the time is running out. In the maps before, we always knew where the dividing line was in the harbor. This map does not show you where that dividing line is, and I'm running out of time, so I can't explain this. If you actually saw where the borders are in the harbor, you would find that they're extremely strange. And if in the next 10 years we had a liveaboard candidate for city council, it would be difficult for them from this map to know which district they would be running from. Thank you. It needs refinement, and you should get it refined and introduce it at your next meeting, not this one. Thank you.
We don't want to displace or disenfranchise any sea lions, so let's be sure that that actually is solved. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, have we received any oral or written objections to the proposed map?
No, we haven't.
And does this map consider all constitutional considerations?
Yes, it does.
So, Mr. City Attorney, is it your legal opinion this map is in compliance with the federal and local laws that and when it comes to districting?
Yes, it is my opinion that it is.
Okay. So can we solve the water? Let me just ask, if someone has a liveaboard and they wanted to be a candidate, how would that be decided right now since we're not looking at a map that contains those lines?
Right. So the California Election Code and the census, they look at the actual physical address. So a liveaboard on a vessel, they don't necessarily get counted because they use the address of the marina facility or P.O. box or so forth. So, so all of the addresses that we review for census, we'd have nothing in the harbor that's addressed. It's only on land.
Makes perfect sense to me. Great. Any comments from the dais?
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay, and Councilman Benders, you want to?
I was just confused by what Jim was saying about the yellow line that he said still exists to Big Corona Beach, because it doesn't look like that in the maps. Did I misunderstand Jim?
Councilmember Brenner, if I may, do you have a... Yeah. So that particular block is submerged. It's 100% submerged, so there's no population or housing that's attached to that block. So it's not a factor in determining of the district boundaries nor the district population. So what happens is they're not precise, so the shoreline transition kind of goes in and out. The lines are not precise to the shoreline. So we take wherever the address of that property is, that's what district that property resides in.
Great. So I'm not expecting any objections from any of the citizens then?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So now the public hearing is closed. No other comments from the dais. We have a motion made by Councilman O'Neill and seconded by Councilwoman Dixon. Let's vote.
Prior to reading the vote, I'll read the ordinance title for ordinance 2022-7, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach, changing and refining the City Council district boundaries as a result of the United States Census Bureau's 2020 census. The motion carries unanimously 7-0.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, notice to the public.
The City Council of Newport Beach welcomes and encourages community participation. Public comments are generally limited to 3 minutes per person to allow everyone to speak. Written comments are encouraged as well. The City Council has a discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now it's time for council announcements or reports from council members on committee activities. And the time for council members to request an A1 item be placed on a future agenda. Councilman O'Neill, do you have any announcements or reports?
Just real quickly, the Hogue Classic was great. So to everybody who helped put that on, congratulations. I was also able to attend the Newport Beach City Track Meet, which was very well attended this year after missing the last 3 years. And then with a number of colleagues up here, attended the memorial service for Officer Vela, which was really inspiring. And to everyone who organized that, also congratulations, and to our colleagues in Huntington Beach, our prayers continue to be with you and your families. On Thursday at 3 p.m., we have a City Finance Committee meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Duffield.
Yeah, we had finally had another water quality meeting, and I can assure you our water is of highest quality. And we're looking into the drought and those things coming up. So, but everyone on the committee is ready to lend a hand, and Mark, of course, does a fabulous job. So that's the end of my report.
Short and sweet. Councilwoman Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. A few items. The Aviation Committee met last Monday, and we reviewed the work that was completed or still ongoing from last year from 2021, and set our action plan of work for 2022. We have an enthusiastic committee, and staff of John Wayne Airport attended and participates in our discussion. It's very productive. I also attended by Zoom the monthly meeting of the Skag Regional Council last Thursday. It's focused always on housing. Much of it is frustrating, but it's what Skag does. Councilmember Brenner and I shared a town hall last Thursday. District 1 and District 6 had a good attendance and had full reports from staff on public safety, public works, community development, and the harbor, briefly. So a good turnout. And our first in-person town hall, incidentally, my 34th town hall since I've been elected. So I enjoy these times to hear from residents. Councilmember Brenner and I were both in Sacramento yesterday. It was a long day from 4:30 to 10 p.m., 4:30 a.m. to 10 p.m., but I'm sure she'll mention we met with a full day of governor staff people from the state controller's office, the deputy controllers, 2 of them, and assembly members and members of the California Transportation Commission, woman Janet Wynn, Lori Davies, Chief of Staff to Pat Bates, and Carolyn Coleman of the League of California Cities. To no one's surprise, there were, I think, 3,000 bills that they said have been proposed, which is a record. In the last 2 legislative sessions, 900 bills related to housing have gone through the legislature. So we're feeling the effects of a hyperactive legislature. And so we'll have a lot of work on our plate. Incidentally, where's Simone? ADUs are not done yet. The state, various proposals, you don't have to come up. One proposal by the person who's been authoring these ADU bills that have been becoming law for the last several years. They're now going to remove city authority related to height of ADUs. So we could have an ADU skyscraper in our neighborhoods. Okay. Yes, Officer Vella's funeral service this morning was magnificent at the Honda Center, about 3,000 to 5,000 people. 99% public safety, all these amazing men and women in their uniforms. And thanks to the city of Irvine that was keeping the city of Huntington Beach and maybe Newport Beach safe today because of all their officers were attending the amazing funeral service. I am going to propose an A1 item related to the city's municipal code section 5.46 related to film permits in the city. We've had a number of issues from residents in some parts of our city complaining about the intrusion and negative impacts in their neighborhoods. So I don't think this ordinance has been looked at in about 25 years. It's probably time that we look at it again. And that's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Brenner.
Yes. The joint town hall that Diane and I had together was really interesting, and I really recognized how much staff time we take up when we do those. And so I would just make the offer in the future that anytime any of us want to join together to do town halls that include all of our neighborhoods, it might be really beneficial because there's a lot of information. It was unfortunate that the peninsula lost power halfway through, so people that were watching it on their computers were not able to see all of it. But anyway, it was very positive, and I thought the use of staff time was especially helpful. At the ACCOC legislative session that we attended, it was interesting to meet some of these legislators in person. You know, a lot of them are focused on having to get reelected every time they turn around. It's not a good use of legislators' time when they're constantly campaigning. But anyway, we did talk to them about our concerns about the housing element, and the other thing that they talked about was that they anticipate that the parking requirement for an ADU is going to be eliminated. So that's another thing that could be dramatic effect on us. And the other thing we did was when we met with Carolyn Coleman, who's the head of the League of Cities organization, we wanted to talk with her because we have some ongoing issues with group homes in our city, and it's growing, and it's not just sober living homes now, but it's also the social rehabilitation homes for people recovering from mental illnesses. And the problem is they're concentrated along the coast. And so a lot of the cities throughout California don't recognize the problem. So we met with her and we wanted to get her advice and ask her to help us to make other cities across California aware of this and aware of how problematic they are so that we can hopefully get their cooperation with the legislators from our districts who are looking for solutions to these problems. Our main ask is that they let us regulate them instead of having Sacramento do it, but we don't know how far we'll go with that. But it was a very productive conversation. The other thing is I am now, for the second time, enrolled in the Citizens Police Academy program. And I got about through 3 sessions before the pandemic started when they canceled it, and now we're starting again with another good class. And I'm having people, when I mention it, I have people in our community that don't know anything about it. So I'm really encouraging people to go to the police department website and read up on the Citizens Police Academy, because they are always anxious to include people from our community, and it gives you such a great sense of all the wonderful work that they do in our police department. So that's it for me, and then I am recused on item 4 on the consent calendar.
Thank you, Councilman Avery.
Thank you, Mayor. Last Wednesday, I attended the Orange County Sanitation District Board meeting, and today, along with my fellow council members, attended the memorial service for Officer Nicholas Vela, which was exceptional, and as sad as it was, such an extraordinary individual, it was something to really become aware of the closeness of the public safety community in Orange County. Just an amazing show of support for the family and for each other. And, every day they're out there putting their lives on the line for us. And I think it's incredible the support they get from each other, and they have to, because only they know what's going on in terms of the risks they take, and not knowing whether someone's going to come home after a day's work. So it just made me more impressed with that community, and it was done so well. Extraordinary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't touch upon the committee meetings and the funeral today. I think Councilman Avery really hit it perfectly there. But I do want to touch upon the fact that we, for the first time in a couple of years, were able to bring back the Hogue Classic, and it was great to see so much of the community out for an entire week of different events. And the only hope is that we can keep bringing these back more and more, and kind of reinvigorating what this city is, and remembering, that we are a community, and bringing that all together. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple announcements. I was also able to attend the Hogue Classic awards ceremony and congratulate Mr. Goosen, who is a South African and was hit by lightning as a young man on the golf course. Really remarkable story. Great discipline. And kind gentleman who says he'll be back next year to defend his title. So we got something to look forward to next year. I also was at the funeral or tribute to fallen officer Nicholas Vela. And one thing that I thought was really remarkable that sort of slipped through the cracks is the chief for Huntington Beach, who's relatively new, is Chief Parra. He talked about the personnel file of this individual, Nick as his friends call him. He had 80 commendations. I've never heard of anything like that. Our department might have people of similar amazing reputations and valor, I would argue, because that's just extraordinary. And you really learned what a valuable man it is that we lost. And for Newport Beach, we lost him answering the call to serve as our residents and protect the peace here in Newport Beach. And the hearts of, obviously, our law enforcement and community and this council go out to Mr. Vela and his family and our neighbors in Huntington Beach. And I think we have one slide. Okay, so the City of Newport Beach and CR&R, our trash hauler, will be hosting a paper shredding e-waste disposal and compost giveaway on Saturday, April 9th from 8 to noon. The events will be held at the corporate yard at 592 Superior Avenue over on the border of Costa Mesa. It's free to Newport Beach residents, so please bring your ID. Paper will be shredded on site, and you can bring e-waste such as computer monitors, cell phones, and printers for disposal, but you may not bring hard drive with bitcoins in them. Residents can also get up to 2 300-pound bags of compost while supplies last. For more information, go to www.newportbeachca.gov/shred. Okay, now we're on to matters with council members have asked to place on a future agenda. I believe we have 2.
The first item is from Councilmember Brenner. Consider a discussion regarding the transferability of short-term lodging permits.
Yeah, so this is not time for discussion. Simply raise your hand to show support to discuss the item at a future council meeting.
That would be Mayor Pro Tem Blom and Council Members Brenner, Avery, and Dixon.
Thank you. And this one is from myself. I'll go ahead and read this one. So I requested the city support the city of Huntington Beach, creating a memorial in Newport Beach for Huntington Beach Police Officer Nicholas Vela. Please vote.
That would be unanimous.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, notice to the public regarding public comments on consent calendar.
This is the time in which council members may pull items from the consent calendar for discussion. Those are items 2 through 10. Public comments are also invited on consent calendar items. Speakers must limit comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record. If any item is removed from the consent calendar by a council member, members of the public are invited to speak on each item for up to 3 minutes per item. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine and will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. Council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending an action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the City Council votes on the motion unless members of the City Council request specific items to be discussed and are removed from the consent calendar for separate action.
Thank you. Councilman O'Neill, do you have any items to pull from the consent calendar or conflicts and anything related items 2 through 10? Councilman Duffield. Councilman Dixon.
I have none.
Councilwoman Brenner.
Recusal on item 4, and I'd like to pull item 9 for discussion.
Councilman Mabry.
None.
Mayor Pro Tem Blon.
I have none.
And I have none, but I just want to confirm, Mr. Harp, that 7 is not a conflict for me. It shouldn't be. I just want to get it on the record.
No, it's not.
Great. So Mayor Pro Tem Blom, do you have a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move the balance of consent with the change to the minutes and the recusal of Councilwoman Brenner on item 4.
Great, and item 9 pulled?
And item 9 is going to be pulled for discussion.
Thank you so much. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Let's have public comments on consent calendar items 2 through 10. Please come forward. Okay, seeing no speakers on this and seeing no request to speak from the dais, let's vote.
Prior to reading the vote, I'll read the ordinance titles for item 4, ordinance 2022-5, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach adopting revisions to zoning code amendment CA 2019-9, amending Title 20, Planning and Zoning of the City of Newport Beach Municipal Code related to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units for consistency with the California Coastal Commission's modification in state law, and ordinance 2022-6, accepting the California Coastal Commission's suggested modifications and adopting local coastal program amendment LC 2019-8 to amend Title 21 Local Coastal Program Implementation Plan of the City of Newport Beach Municipal Code related to accessory dwelling units. The motion carries unanimously 7-0.
Thank you. With item 9 pulled by Council Member Brenner, would you wish to have a staff report? Okay, great. Staff?
Thank you, council members. With me is Lauren Wooding-Whitlinger, and Madam Clerk, we have a PowerPoint. Sorry. I'll do it. It's item 9. Thank you. So this is the subject area. It's in the west part of town, off 15th Street in Monrovia. So I'm going to kind of zoom in there. And you can see the site there, which is 1499 Monrovia. So the city used to own that property, and we sold it to the late Kobe Bryant. At the time, with Mr. Bryant, we had that shaded area. You see that shaded area in red. That was reserved, and the whole idea of that piece of parcel there is that we were going to punch 15th Street all the way into Banning Ranch. At the time when we sold the Monrovia property to Mr. Bryant, he needed that parcel for parking. We didn't have any plans to do any capital improvement projects, and Banning Ranch wasn't moving forward. So we granted, during the sale and the escrow, granted a license agreement to Mr. Bryant for the use of that property. And that was a no-fee agreement. That was about 10 years now?
We sold the property in 2017.
And that license agreement now is expired. Mr. Bryant did sell the property to the Pacifica Christian High School group. The license agreement was assigned to them, but it is expiring. So the city staff, we have looked at the parcel. There is a council policy about charging fair market value. So since we're going to give or issue a new license agreement to the Pacifica team, we were looking at our council policy, which says fair market value. And hence, they are looking for some council input that they would enjoy the same benefit that the Kobe ownership did, which was a no-fee agreement. And so hence this item now is before you through Councilmember Will O'Neill. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Any more questions immediately? Okay, great. Councilwoman Dixon?
Thanks, Mo. Just a couple questions. So just to clarify, the property was sold by the city to Kobe Bryant.
Correct.
Does the city own the property?
So I'm sorry, there's two parcels there. So there's the triangle shape, and then there's the red shape. We sold the triangle, we retained the red. We still own the red portion, that shaded red portion.
Okay, and the theory originally, years and years ago when that was zoned, so that 15th, is that 15th or 16th?
It's 15th.
15th. Had Banning Ranch evolved to where our original thought process was, that would be an access road. So now that Banning Ranch is not available for development by the city of Newport Beach, is there any purpose for holding that as an access road?
So we are looking at that. It is a little bit more complicated. It's on our master plan of streets and highways. And so to amend that, we have to go to OCTA, and that's a long process. So we don't have an answer whether can we sell it to Pacifica or not. They've asked, can we sell it? So we don't have that answer yet because it is the master.
So they would like to buy it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. They have expressed that.
Okay. Alternatively, can it be developed into anything else?
Again, we have the Surplus Lands Act. We have to put it up for affordable housing development and go through that process. So I wouldn't know. It's only 12,000 square feet. You're only going to put 5 units at best, but we have to go through that process.
And does that parking lot meet their parking requirements for the school?
It does help with their parking requirements. If they lose that property, then they're going to be very short on parking.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilman Brenner.
I have a question about other properties where we do this in town. Are there other examples where is that what this is? Okay, that's what this is.
I'll have Ms. Whitlinger go ahead and kind of talk about what we have.
Yes, we do have quite a few properties where we charge either $1 per year or no fee for the agreement. They range from permits to license agreements, encroachment agreements to full lease agreements. We've got the Balboa Angling Club, which is a fishing club down on the peninsula. The Dory fishing fleet is also fishing down near Newport Pier. And then Fletcher Jones, they use a portion of city property along the Jamboree frontage. And that's a no-fee agreement.
So I was looking at them thinking, are they all nonprofits? But then I saw Fletcher Jones, so they're obviously not all nonprofits. Is there a similarity between all of these, that there could be a policy that said we routinely do this? Or I am really looking for something that gives us a policy so that it doesn't look like we are playing favoritism when these sorts of agreements are offered, so that it's not just the people we like that, and I personally love Pacifica Christian High School, but I don't want us to be accused of giving good deals to some people and not good deals to others. So can you tell me how we could resolve that?
Yeah, so the council does have a council policy, F7, and it does require fair market value. So the council already has a policy of that. And from a staff standpoint, we look and figure out fair market value. Either we do the calculation or we hire appraisers to do that. All your council policies can be waived, and it takes a council action to do that. If you don't want to charge a fair market value for whatever use or whatever nonprofit or business, it's going to be really up to the council's discretion. Each one of these that has a no-fee agreement, there's a story behind each one of those. And, I can't say that anybody had a special deal. It was deliberated at the council level, and the council has to decide whether they want to waive the policy or not. So I think we do have a policy. It's whether, if you want to add to that policy and amend the F7, that's a separate A1 action by the council to kind of give some guidance on when to waive F7 and when not to. I mean, you can definitely do that. But I feel you have a council policy.
But this is a deviation from our council policy.
It is a waiver, correct.
So, and I guess my other concern is that we have other types of leases in the city where we are required to charge fair market value, for instance, in our Tidelands area. And then, people get upset if we don't charge fair market value, so they could say, well, you're charging us fair market value, but you're not charging these other organizations fair market value.
You make a very good point. We do have State Lands Commission that we have to work with. They're pretty adamant about us charging fair market value. I don't know if each one of these has a special exemption or not, but I think you make a very good and strong point.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman O'Neill.
Okay, it's the attorney in me. I'm going to push back. We are not waiving F7, just to be clear. F7 is a city council policy that includes a whole bunch of policies that have all been invoked here. You have subsection E that allows us to make particular findings. You have subsection F that allows us to make a bunch of findings. It's referenced in the staff report. That if we make these findings, then those are not waivers of a council policy. We have the policy, and we would be able to work within that council policy. And so on this one, I mean, this one is just an odd one. Let's go back to the map, Simone. I mean, we're looking at a right-of-way that is still a right-of-way, and it's still within that master plan that you're referencing. For us to change it away from being a right-of-way, we would have to go through a pretty extensive regional process. And we haven't done that, and we're not doing that anytime soon. So this is still a right-of-way. We can't do anything with this while it's still that right-of-way. And that's sort of the point of why we did this in the first place. So when we're talking about an existing lease that right now, all we're talking about is an extension and not a creation of a new thing or trying to confer new benefits. What we're really talking about is a really weirdly unique piece of property toward Banning Ranch that I would still contend is not off limits yet for development. It's clear we've said that in our housing development or housing element that we've submitted. So that right-of-way is still necessary for our housing element to make sense. And even if it ends up being that Banning Ranch ends up as a open space only, it may end up being that the future owners of Banning Ranch would want this access road anyway to be able to get onto the open space if it turns into parkland. So I kind of want to just push back on this and remind everybody, like, this is a really weirdly unique space that cannot be converted to anything other than what it is right now. And if we didn't extend this lease, it would be vacant concrete, period. Like that, we would have to keep it the way it is anyway. So while we have a tenant right next door that has been using it productively and increasing the value of the area around it by pouring a lot of money into a new building, as well as, by the way, right down the street at the Pacific campus, taking a building owned by the city, putting a lot of money into that and upgrading the facilities. This is a tenant that has provided a lot of benefit to our city for just aesthetics and financial reasons. So this is one of those, there's no precedent-setting aspect of this at all. You cannot point to a single thing in our city that looks anything like this. And so that's why that's why when we brought it forward on an A1 basis, it is this one weird one-off that we've got to deal with. And while we're still dealing with what are we going to do with this someday because of its unique nature as a right-of-way, then we need to, it is conferring a benefit on the city by having it being constructively used as opposed to a vacant concrete wasteland for 12,000 square feet. I just don't understand why we would want that over trying to move forward on a constructive basis right now when we still don't know what we need to do with this. And it's probably going to take 10 years, frankly, for us to even figure that out. So that's why I'm moving forward on this. Let's let it be used productively and not turn it into just vacant concrete. It doesn't make any sense to me for us to try to set that kind of precedent. Thanks.
Councilman Blum. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. And I appreciate what Councilman O'Neill said. And my take on this is just slightly different, that, our job as a city is to find the most productive use of properties that we have for the benefit of our community. And as I look at this area, and I've talked extensively with some of city staff about this, this has become kind of our university district, our schooling district over in this area. And helping perpetuate that idea with an area that, I would love to hold out hope that we're going to be able to build all the houses we want here. I'm looking at you, Nancy. All the houses should go here. I know, we're all there. But the reality is that right now we have to use what we have. And to underpark a school, especially a school that's put a huge amount of resources in, is strange to me, especially when we're not using it. And I think that's part of the idea of when the city holds lands, what do we do with them? Is it in the benefit of the public or of the residents to have vacant spaces or a potential right-of-way? I think we look at property all the time with how can this benefit the city as a whole? And this whole area, as it slowly started to develop, is creating something that's really amazing in an area of West Newport that I don't think many of us have been to in a long time. And I was just over there actually kind of touring around this area, trying to get onto Banning Ranch so I could, pop a little tent. But it is one of those pieces where you see a huge amount of investment going into an area of our city where we don't have a lot of investment. And I think that that's really kind of where we're circling around here, is that when we can find people that want to help rebuild elements of our city, it's not about how much does the city make. Do we get dollars and cents from this property? We're not in that business, as Simone told me early on. We're not here to make money. We're here to have a service to the residents of this city and make sure that we can all pay our bills and balance our budget. And I think that this is one of those items where when I see Pacifica there, Coastline there, and I think Carden Hall is right next to it, we have an amazing area overlooking an amazing piece. And so this was one of those things that did seem like a no-brainer to me, because we want those schools. We want this type of environment, and we want more people to be able to say they were educated in Newport Beach. And, you know, I think these are the things that help assist in kind of that long-term goal. So, thank you.
It's better.
Yes. I'm not looking at a way to deny this. I'm looking at a way for our policy to be so consistent that there is no deviation and there's no ability for anyone to claim favoritism, you know. And so when you look at that list, well, even if you look at Kobe Bryant, we all adored Kobe. So, you know, I understand how the council at that time wanted to give him a good deal, but quite honestly, we can't justify giving deals to our friends. So I'm just looking at how does our policy need to be tweaked? Is there anything that needs to be done that can prevent this being called favoritism?
Thank you, Councilman Avery.
Thank you. This is a very valuable parcel to Pacifica Christian's operation. When you're there and you see, you know, how they rotate cars around the whole campus there, starting at the bottom of the triangle and then departing out the top. You know, without it, it really makes their life difficult, no question. And it's a great organization. I think they do a fantastic job and serve a need. But what I don't get here is why we couldn't come to terms with them for some amount of a lease and for all these nonprofits. I just think that all the nonprofits get income from charitable contributions and different things. And I'm not saying you need necessarily have to hold their feet to the fire for some exorbitant rate, but I would just feel better about it with all public land, that if a private organization, whether it's a nonprofit or a profit, is using that land, they should be paying something for it. Not usurious, but I just generally feel it kind of, I think if you ask people in town, out of all those properties, there should be some revenue to the city for it. I mean, we provide services to that parcel, all the rest of it. But you could do storage on that property. That property could have been offered to anyone in the community to bid on it. But I understand how it helps Pacifica Christian here. And so as a council member, I would look for a way to make that happen. But I would like to see some remuneration back to the city. I just think it's so valuable to them, and not that we're going to hold their feet for it, but I think the suggested rent or the assumed rent by a study shows that would be about $28,000 a year, and I think that's a pretty valuable parcel for $28,000 a year. But maybe it doesn't need to be 20, but it needs to be something in my view. But I'd hate to see, I can't imagine them operating right now without it, because of this unique situation they have with their traffic pattern. And, they're pretty successful. They've got a strong organization. They've got a good board, all the rest of it. I just would have liked to have seen a little effort to say, hey, we'll give you something. Because my understanding is they're reluctant to give us anything, and I might be wrong with that. But so that's where I'm at, and I think each one of these is a special relationship with each one of these entities that benefits from public land without paying for it, and that needs to be acknowledged. And but each one of those, I think there's probably a way to make everybody feel better if they're paying something along the way. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
A couple questions, contract questions. So this is a revocable license agreement, correct, Ms. Harp?
Yeah, so it would be extended for 10-year term, but we can terminate basically on 90 days' notice.
We want that because there's a scenario where this lot that was intended to be for through traffic might happen either through planning with RENA or some unforeseeable Caltrans request. And so we want the ability, I imagine, to be able to terminate a license agreement, which is different from a lease agreement. If we were to say, the school, which, I don't think that we would deny the good use the school brings to the community and the importance of safety and them having a parking lot that they control for the sake of trespassers or threats to the children's security. If we were to treat this school like a business perhaps, and we were to enter an agreement where we're going to charge them fixed dollar amount, would we have the same ability to immediately revoke that agreement?
Yes.
So the benefit is not necessarily in the ability to revoke this license agreement as much, in my opinion, as public safety and goodwill to the community. Is there anything, Mr. Hart, that concerns you about this agreement that we're voting on this evening, as far as the legality of it or equity?
I think that's fully within the council's discretion to make the findings under the council policy, finding that the benefit is there. And you don't have to get straight fair market value for it. I mean, that is an option. You can make those findings under F7. It does have that 90-day provision for termination. So if you wanted to come back and take another look at it at any time, you could.
So we have here a institution dedicated to education, a nonprofit entity. Would you please put up the list of other examples where we have revocable license agreements? And in all of these, we have a $1 or no fee. So we have one of the largest corporations, private entities in the entire city, arguably the county, no, probably not the county, but pretty good, Fletcher Jones.
Mr. Mayor, just a correction, not all of them are license agreements. Some have different instruments.
I understand, but the consideration is either $0 or $1.
That's correct.
Pacifica's willing to pay $1, right? Yes. So I see other entities that are similarly situated, like Back Bay Science Center, Boys and Girls Club, great organization, Girl Scouts. I was honored to be part of that decision to allow the Girl Scouts to have that opportunity. Lawn bowling, staple in the community, lawn bowling. You can't mess with that. Yeah, that's almost a cultural and commercial fix or a fixture. So I personally don't have a problem with it, but if we're done discussing on the dais, let's go to the public and we can perhaps hear from the other party as well. Public comments, please come forward.
Good evening. Mayor Muldoon and council members, I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you this evening. My name is Luis Garcia. I'm the Director of Business and Operations at Pacifica Christian High School, Orange County. And I've been with the school since 2012 or 2013, started full-time 2014. And I think that what I would like to present to you this evening is that, as you've already said, Pacifica Christian High School is dedicated towards educating young people in this community. We are a nonprofit, and we have a few mission goals that I think lend themselves to being amongst the organizations that are on the slide this evening. The first thing is that we are a school for every neighborhood, and what that means is that if you cannot afford to pay full tuition at Pacifica, you are not therefore automatically denied entrance. If a student can be successful at our school, and that can mean a lot of different things, we want that student there. And so we provide an enormous amount of financial assistance to help those students. Of course, that means that we need to fundraise, because we also believe that other full pay families should not subsidize scholarship families. So right now, the cost of tuition is roughly the cost to educate a student at Pacifica. The reason that's important is because we are not overcharging our full pay families and then taking some of that money and subsidizing other families' educations. If we let a scholarship student into Pacifica, their education is subsidized by donors to the school. The reason I bring that up is that we have a pretty substantial annual fund goal, and it's largely due to financial assistance. I think somewhere around the range of about 40 to 45% of our students receive some financial assistance in order to subsidize their education at Pacifica. And we find that we believe it's very, very important to provide that to this community. This is an affluent community. I'm fully aware of that, and so we do have many families that can afford that tuition. But as you know, not everyone in this community can do so. And we do believe that Pacifica is primarily a school for this community. We're happy to be in West Newport. We think that there are a lot of opportunities to build and grow and be of value to that part of Newport Beach. We believe that in the 8-ish years that we've occupied the West Newport Community Center, that there have been positive changes in the community. And so we do think that the city of Newport Beach is also receiving value from the existence of Pacifica in the community. And maybe that could be considered as part of the remuneration for this little piece of land. Sorry, I'll just finish by saying that we're really just looking for an extension of an agreement that was already in place with the late Kobe Bryant. And then perhaps in the future, as things change at the school, we might be open to some other agreement. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I like that microphone. It bites. Good evening, Mayor Muldoon and members of the council. My name is Nancy Scarborough. In looking at this list of other organizations, there really aren't organizations there that are businesses other than Fletcher Jones. The Girl Scouts are not raising very much money. They couldn't afford $28,000 a year for a parking lot. So I think that those are not necessarily the same kinds of business. I believe the Pacifica Christian School is a great asset to Newport Beach. My kids went to a Christian school. I know they're expensive. It's hard for families to pay for that, and I know that tuition needs to be kept at a minimum. However, it is a business, and I think that strictly from a financial perspective, we're operating business here. We're taking care of the city's business, and I think that we should treat this transaction as we would treat any other business transaction based on a fair market price or some agreed upon equitable arrangement. I don't think that it's going to sit unused as a concrete parking lot. As a matter of fact, I was there this weekend. It's already paved, striped, and landscaped, so it's going to be a parking lot, whether we agree to grant this to them at no cost or if we agree to some reasonable amount of lease payment. Thank you very much.
I think the Arduous family and the Girl Scouts Executive Director Board would disagree with your assertion about their capabilities financially. Yes, Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Charles Klob. Before I read my comments, I want to comment a little bit about some things I didn't know until I got here. The first is I wasn't aware of this list, and I think some of those should perhaps be looked at for zero fee or $1 a year, certainly in the case of Fletcher Jones. Secondly, I note that this was A1 by Councilman O'Neill, and it turns up on the consent calendar. So we're having to force a discussion about something that the public couldn't have participated in unless a council person pulled it. So it went from A1 to consent. That's a surprise to me. And lastly, before I read, Councilmember Blum might be surprised to know that the original architect of this building used to occupy the space where his restaurant now is, Bill Ficker. So I'm here today to oppose the city starting down this slippery slope, and clearly they already have, and that's what adds fuel to the fire today of, well, you've already done it for these people. The argument here effectively is you've done it for these, so let's do it again. And I believe this can be perpetuated, and I don't agree with it in general. I like Councilman Avery's idea of something. property at below market rent, in this case, no rent. And by the way, it's hard to read the city staff report to see that it really is no rent. It isn't boldly in there saying no rent. You have to dig to figure that out. There are many nonprofits in Newport Beach. If you approve this and set this precedent, although it has been set, and I'm the president of 2 nonprofits, we like to ask for similar treatment. There are many scenarios that could be argued to justify similar treatment. Hope you consider these comments and reject this proposal at no rent tonight. No one here wants, and of those of us speaking, want this to not be used as a parking lot right now. And frankly, I concur with Councilman O'Neill. Did you like that? Concur. That there is no guarantee of whether that's going to be access to Banning Ranch in the future. Whether it's housing or open space, the current plan for Banning Ranch is 17th Street, and many of us don't think 17th Street can support it. So having additional entrances, whether it be PCH or 15th Street for whatever it may be, I agree with, and I don't think that we should sell it. This nonprofit, I believe, is church-based, so if we were to sell it, we wouldn't get anything out of property tax. We would just get whatever we sell. So I agree with keeping it and renting it at some value to the user. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council, my name, as you know, is Jim Mosier. First, when we heard about the difficulty of people raising money to attend this private high school, it did occur to me from my own experience that we do have public high schools in Newport Beach. Second comment I wanted to make is that many members of the public, including sometimes me, rightly or wrongly, think that when land use issues come before the Planning Commission or the City Council, the city staff seems to present things in a somewhat biased way, as if they're kind of rooting for the person who is applying for something. We have this list up here of all the organizations that are getting property at no rent or $1 a year. Could we see a list of properties that the city is actually charging something for and who it's charging those people? Or is there nobody that would charge anything for use of public property in Newport Beach? I would think that you would need that other list to balance this list. And then the final comment I wanted to make is already been made by Councilman Avery and some of the public speakers, which is if this lot belonged to the lot that we saw above it with the white building on it, and that was a private business or factory of some kind, and this would still be valuable to the high school, and the owner of that lot would be charging them presumably $28,000 a year, and the high school would be willing to pay that. We're effectively giving them a gift for that. The white building on that lot is actually the Orange Coast College building, or Coastline College building. And I assume if that had been part of the Coastline property, they would be charging something for its use. I don't know what that would be. And like Councilman Avery, I don't see why we're making this binary decision that it either has to be the fair market value or zero, that there can't be something in between. I think the high school at zero is getting an extremely good buy from the city that they would not get from any other landholder, and I do not understand why. Thank you.
Next speaker, please come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, staff. Thank you for hearing this matter tonight. My name is David Bonson. I'm a 25-year resident in the city, a co-founder of Pacifica Christian High School, and the vice president of the Board of Trustees and chairman of the Finance Committee. One of the names that's missing from this list up here is Kobe Inc., which of course is probably the best apples to apples comparison because it's literally the same property that we're discussing tonight. So in that case, you had one of the wealthiest and most high-profile residents in the history of our great city who so graciously sold us the building that he owned next door to this parcel prior to his tragic passing. And that individual was receiving the no-fee arrangement that we're here to discuss tonight. Our school has to raise a couple of $1 million per year, every single year, to fund operations. I know that because I'm one of the main donors that has to help finance it. Every dollar that we have to pay out for things like additional expenses is nothing more than a dollar that comes out of a potential scholarship. We give out something in the range right now at this capacity of $2.1 million per year in scholarship funds, meaning the discount given on people to attend our school below full ask. I want to be clear that I don't really believe we should be receiving something unfair. I'm only asking for what the deal was at the time we bought the building, the license arrangement, and I believe some of the staff may recall, because it's been a little while since we did our deal on 15th Street, but the city ran a process to adjudicate what fair market value would be on our lease on 15th Street. Appraisals came back at $15,000, $16,000 a month, and it didn't kind of pass the smell test, and they said it's going to be more, and we've now been paying $25,000 a month. We've paid the city a little over $2 million since we started operations on the school. We're not looking for a free ride. That's real cash that our nonprofit, almost entirely out of money that we have to raise, has given to the city. This particular deal is very, very unique, and I do believe that the best precedent is just merely what is already in place with the prior owner, who obviously, even apart from these nonprofits and Fletcher Jones, Kobe Inc. was the actual owner of that property. It was a for-profit entity. Someone alluded earlier to us, our business, but we are a nonprofit that is entirely dependent on donors to feed the mission of this school. I do appreciate a lot of the kind words that have been said tonight. I am not totally convinced that one could come up with a fair market value. A prior speaker alluded to wondering what some of the other rents the city charges for land it owns, but the city doesn't own any other land that is like this, that is just literally a piece of concrete between Coastline and our building that we've now put $14 million into. It is of no economic benefit to the city whatsoever, and we desperately need it for our operations. But I will offer to prepay that $1 a month rent for 100, or $1 a year rent for 100 years, if that will help satisfy our needs tonight. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Hong Kong lease, 99 years. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm just going to reiterate. I believe that if Kobe Inc. were still the adjacent landowner or title holder of this property, that we would be continuing this license agreement because it allows us flexibility to quickly revoke it for the sake of transportation with no injury to either party. And it's an obscure property that I think has a very important benefit to a school that is very concerned about safety on campus. So I will move the item. Councilman O'Neill.
Well, second. So coming back around real quick, I actually wanted to keep that up. So coming back around, if we want to revisit F7 and have a discussion about, making sure that on a going forward basis, we negotiate fair market rent for all these folks, I suppose we could do that in the future. We do have Newport Harbor lawn bowling coming up soon. And so, Councilmember Avery or Councilmember Brenner would certainly could form an ad hoc and go negotiate fair market rent for Newport Harbor lawn bowling, right? I mean, I would welcome that. I think it'd be interesting to see what you'd be able to negotiate with them. I mean, that's an amazing spot in the middle of Corona Del Mar. I'm struggling with the idea that a high school provides less public benefit than lawn bowling, frankly. But I mean, if that's the direction we want to go down, head down, and make sure that we're negotiating on a fair market rent, that's the next one that's coming up on this list. So if anyone wants to jump on an ad hoc to go negotiate fair market rent for the lawn bowling, I think they should. But coming back around on this though, and I think this is important when we're kind of working through. This really is a one-off. I mean, you look at the Girl Scouts of Orange County, because of public speaker, I was kind of curious, so I looked. 2 years ago, the Girl Scouts of Orange County disclosed on their tax roll, or on their tax return, that they have $16.8 million in net assets with $11.1 million in revenue that particular year. I think they probably could have afforded something right, for Girl Scouts of Orange County, but a prior council made the decision that they would get a $1 a year lease for 50 years, right? And they paid that upfront at the ceremony, which was kind of fun. But I mean, that's when we are making decisions as a city, we're not a for-profit organization, we're a city. And we have to make decisions from time to time on, what we want to encourage in particular areas of our city. And all of these decisions, maybe folks up here made some of these decisions. I don't remember these coming up while I've been on council. Maybe they did, but I think most of them, probably all of them, are defensible because they add value into our community that matter. And they're operating in a way where we probably could as a city if we took on the role of a park and put a bunch of our own employees on there, or we could just not charge them, and a nonprofit could do it more efficiently and better. And so there are things we're going to need to continue to evaluate and encourage. But to Mr. Mosier's point, yeah, we have a lot of land that we charge a lot of money on. All you have to do is Lido House or Bay Club. There's millions of dollars that are coming into the city through for-profit leaseholds. So I just come back around on this. This is such a one-off deal. It's an existing lease with land that is we cannot do anything with while we still have in this as a potential arterial or right of way. And so it's just I don't think this is a particularly difficult vote. So I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
Thank you, Mayor. As I look at this list, and even with Fletcher Jones on this, I think we can all agree that Fletcher Jones has added a large amount to this city and its revenue that's helped us do a lot of things we need to do. But beyond that, we're looking at arts, sports, education, clubs. And the interesting thing for me to think about is that, sure, all of this land can be developed for profit, every ounce of it. But is that what the job is up here? Is our job to sit here and see how much money we can squeeze out of everything? Or is it try to cultivate a community that's constantly putting in money through a different avenue? And nobody sets out to start a school saying, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make so much money on this school. It's going to be great. Yeah. This is tough. It's something you put in because you love where you are. You love your community. You want to give back to it. And especially in an area where I don't think there's a lot of drive for someone to redevelop over there. And I think it's a commendable thing that we have all of these people on this list. I mean, as I look up and down, everyone is invested so heavily in this community. And I think sometimes we miss that I am in business. I am in business to make money. And when I look at a property, that's the first thing I think about. Can I make money on this property? That's not what they said when they decided to start a school over in West Newport. Can we make money on this property? No, they said they wanted something different. And so as this goes back and forth with what can the city get out of it, unfortunately, I don't care. I don't care what the city can get out of this. I think, what can the community get out of this? And the community gets a school. And to Jim's point, sure, we do have public schools. But this last year has proven that sometimes that's hard. And sometimes there's other options that we want to send our children to. And sometimes the parents, much like myself and others on this dais, have struggled to keep their kids in these schools so that they can get something more. And if it's the goal of a city to help perpetuate the idea of these types of things flourishing, then maybe we get more of them, not less of them. Maybe there's more opportunity and less development. Because even though we are in the development business, these are the things that you can't convince a developer to do because it'll never pencil out. There is no ROI on doing a school, especially when you're fundraising every day. And so for us to sit here and say we need to make money off a parking lot we're never going to use, that we might be able to store something on eventually, who cares? I don't want that. I want to know that we can develop an area that has education, that has kids walking up and down the streets, that maybe then spurns a coffee shop or a juice bar or something, a new park that helps create a district that makes the city better. And money has never made anything better. It just makes it available. And so when I look at a speck of land that we're not going to utilize in the foreseeable future. And right now, the debate up here is how much or how little are we going to charge somebody for it? It just seems like greed. And we're not in the business of greed. We're in the business of making our city better. And this school makes our city better. It's connected to other schools. It creates a district that we didn't have before, and it creates a vision that might happen in the future that we have an entire school area. Something where kids can walk around freely and feel comfortable, where we can have cool coffee shops and things that work over there. And maybe we can look at some new housing as we move forward that makes everyone happy. But it's not going to happen if we're nickel and diming this world. And so it has my full support. I would like to see more options like this, where we have property that's only utilized for the betterment of the community and not for some better business that we see in the future. This is the business of what this city is meant to do. Thank you.
Councilwoman Dixon.
Yes, just a couple questions. Simone, Mr. Bonson mentioned the recreation center, the gymnasium that the city still owns, correct?
That's correct.
Do we still operate any classes out of there, out of the gym? I think we do.
We do have some sports that are played in
Yes.
the gymnasium, some shared use of the gymnasium.
Right, okay. So conceivably, members of the public who are benefiting from that shared use opportunity, sports related, it could be parking over in that parking lot, and that is provided for public use of that gymnasium, subject to the hours of operation that are agreed upon. I'm looking at Council Policy F5, as Mr. O'Neill had mentioned earlier, but the findings to waive such a fee or fair market fee finds that the property provides an essential or unique service to the community, or a clearly preferred use that enjoys substantial support in the community. Well, I think raising $2 million or more out of the community to support this educational institution demonstrates community support, and to my satisfaction, and the fact that conceivably members of the public could be parking in that parking lot to use the recreation center 50 feet away, works for me. So I want to keep a school like that in our community and to encourage families to recognize that there's a tremendous educational opportunity. And Coastline College, just as Mr. Blom said, and there's Carden Hall. I mean, when we go through our general plan process in the next year, to really look at that section of West Newport, we've talked about different industrial mixed-use opportunities, but education, I know, has never been conceived in our discussions, and maybe it should be. I can't think of a more beautiful site for a school, Coastline or Pacifica Christian, so I am supportive of this measure tonight. And we have the history of doing this and showing that we try to help the nonprofits that are truly providing essential or unique services to our community. So I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Brunner.
My question is on the price that we charge for the gym property that the school leases from us. I'm trying to remember if that's is that a reduced rate? It's not fair market value there, is it?
The rent is fair market value.
Oh, it
there.
is.
Yeah, there's a discount for the continued shared use of the gym, but the basis for the rent is fair market value.
I'm just wondering if there would be a way to include this in that rental agreement so that it's kind of a joint lease, and especially with Councilwoman Dixon's comments about people parking here to utilize the gym. Is that something that, I'm just looking for a way to do it that looks fair and doesn't cause other people in our community to say, why don't we get the same sort of deal? So that's what I'm wondering about. And for instance, one of the things is that all of these organizations do provide a benefit to our community, and so do a lot of our civic organizations and community organizations, and we still charge them when they use our city facilities. I don't believe we charge them the same amount that we charge other outside for-profit organizations, but we still do charge them something when they're using city property. So I would like to be able to vote in favor of this. I'm just looking for ways that I can do that.
Yeah, so to your first point, Councilmember Brenner, about amending the agreement in our community center, unfortunately, that's already been approved by council, and it's done and it's signed, and so we really couldn't amend that any further at this point. And I don't have, I think it's really going to be based on whenever that agreement comes up for renewal in the future, and I don't know what the term of that agreement was for the community center.
Was a 10-year initial term with a 10-year option. It'll be coming up in the next, I think, 2.
So maybe in 2 years, we can definitely work with the Pacifica and see if to include that when it terminates.
Well, and the other thing that I was thinking was that if we can find in our policy justifications for why we give certain organizations an extremely good deal, that it would be helpful if we just had a list of, and in this case, I think there is justification in that it's a property that we can't really use right now, yet we don't want to sell. And so that makes it compelling for us to find a way to help them and help our community. But, I don't want other groups in our community to be able to throw this back at us and say, well, you gave them this good deal, or these organizations this good deal without. And I believe the NAC lease agreement is going to be coming up sometime soon. So it's like we really need to look at how we justify what we're charging different entities to utilize the people's property, because it's not our property. It belongs to the people of Newport Beach. And so that's what I'm looking for is a way to make sure that we're equitable in the way that we treat various organizations within our city that do provide public benefit.
And I just want to add one quick point. I mean, there is a good reason to somewhat keep these separate, because we do want to have it to be revocable, because it still could be used as part of our circulation element. And having that 90-day feature be able to revoke it is a good way to basically ensure that if we needed access to the property, we would have it.
And if I could add one other thing, Councilmember Brenner, too. I think what you're talking about and that intention is built in with the current policy, and the fact that these findings had to be laid out, and they're laid out in the staff report, which is a public document now that is laid out. So if anybody else were to want to go into some of a similar type of circumstance, it does go through quite a bit of analysis and a set of findings that come out through it that are publicly vetted.
And that's helpful. And I think the discussion tonight has been helpful, because the fact that this is supposed to be a roadway that we have no idea whether it ever will be or not is like a good part of the argument that says why this should be used for some beneficial purpose in the meantime.
Okay, Councilman Avery.
So, Simone, I don't know when. So we Kobe negotiated with the city for their main campus parcel, right?
So we did sell it to Kobe Bryant, and Pacifica did negotiate with the city for our 15th Street Community Center.
So in the negotiations with Kobe, was this land thrown in as part of that negotiation? In other words, did he say at some point, I'm willing to do this deal, but not unless you throw in the parcel? Was there anything connected, any connection of the free rent parcel to the ultimate price of the property? Correct.
I think at the time, Kobe paid more than we paid to acquire the property. And during the negotiations, they didn't want to enter into a financial license agreement. They did want that dollar amount, understanding that we would have to maybe revoke it in the future because of the Banning Ranch opportunity. So it was a very simple decision for the council to make, to say, okay, he's going to pay a premium for the property. He pays $1 for or $0 for this parking lot that we may take over at some point in the future. And that's kind of the gist of how the negotiations went.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's tough when you get into these things and you have this list, and then we're invited to go after Newport Harbor lawn bowling after the fact. And of course, they're an institution. And once these things are set, they're sort of set. It's really no going back. All good intentions here, there's no question. All good intentions in terms of this current situation that we're talking about on both sides, and it all makes sense. This is purely a discussion of whether we should give away public land to any organization. There should be a lot of thought that goes into it, and I think if it just becomes rote that we just do this every time, I just don't agree with it. So if we would have started with a policy of just looking at each organization, and some have much better balance sheets than others, and just an ability to pay basis, but something in it. But most everybody pays some rent or has some deal. For instance, there's plenty of public land where organizations invest on public property, continue to invest and upgrade the facilities, and that is considered the give back for the public benefit. This is to a certain degree is similar. There's a lot of investment that's gone on, and this parcel is critical to their operations, so I get that. But my main, to have it characterized that we would be trying to get the last penny out of somebody, or it's greed, is not correct. All I'm saying is we should make sure we're making the right decision in terms of charging a fair rent on any parcel that's owned by the public, because I think if you ask the public, this wouldn't spell the end of any of these organizations if they paid some rent. It's sort of like, it just feels wrong to me to give something for $1. And what makes it tough is they're all great organizations to do that with, and they all have their needs, and we're also, to Ms. Brenner's point, we're responsible stewards of the public's interest and their property here in the city. So it's a tough one, and I think it's worthy of debate up here and discussion. And so I'm not going to oppose this. I'm going to vote yes. I'll support it. For the reasons everybody's talked about, but I do have concerns about this issue of sort of going forward with something like this for 10 years, and it would definitely generate, in my mind, I think it would generate that same revenue in the real world, that 28,000, just simply as mini storage or boat storage. No question. It's a fairly robust parcel for those uses. But that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
The Fletcher Jones example, that's roadway, correct?
Correct, it is right away.
It's right of way, it has that purpose. Who knows if Caltrans is going to come in and request an access, or if we have a future plan for the sake of housing. I do agree with Mr. Avery's assertion that this is not about greed. It might be about philosophy. I do support nonprofit entities have an opportunity to enjoy a parcel of property the city has no real high use for. Yes, they could make some money on it, but I think the most important thing, I'm looking at this piece of property, is so obscure. It is analogous to Fletcher Jones. It's not prime property, it's a roadway that we may or may not use at some time down the road. And if Councilman Brenner or others want to put more stringent guidelines to bind future councils, I would be fine with that. But I do think that it is within the purview of this council to make this sort of decisions of what groups we think are worthy or not based on their public benefit. That's all. Anyone else have anything to add? They want to add? Nope.
And just that we're continuing an original agreement. This is just a renewal of an original lease, so.
Yeah. Let's vote.
The motion carried unanimously, 7-0.
Okay, we have one remaining item, agenda number 11 on the current business calendar.
Mayor, it's public comments on non-agenda items.
That's right,
Sorry.
thank you. The whole thing got screwed up by that map meeting. Public comments, not condiments, no mustard. Public comments on non-agenda items, please come forward.
Good evening. Back again. Haven't heard enough from me, I'm sure. I just wanted to let you know, if you haven't heard, that the California Tripartisan Land Use Initiative has been moved from the 2022 agenda or election to 2024. That means we're not going to be able to use that if it were to pass to deal with SB 9 and SB 10 in our city. So, and I also attended a forum that talked about all of the new bills this year, over 2,000, I don't know, you heard 3. 48 of them have to do with housing, and reviewed all of those. Some of them are just spot bills, which means they're not fully written, they're partial. And there is one that increases the height of ADUs from 16 feet to 25 feet, and several others that need to be watched. So you'll be hearing more from me later this year. Thank you.
Any other request to speak? Okay, seeing none, now we'll head on to current business item number 11. Simone, would you offer a brief staff?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor Muldoon and City Council members. Simone Jurgis, Community Development Director. With me is Tony Tai. He's the acting building official. This is his first council meeting, and he does have an item on the agenda, but I'll go ahead and present the item. So just to recall, back about 3 years ago, back in June 2019, the council at the time adopted ordinance number 2019-8, and that sets a 3-year time frame for construction projects, in the sense that all projects for 1 and 2 family dwellings, not commercial, not multifamily, need to be completed in 3-year period. Well, So what the process is for that ordinance is that if you start from left to right, this is just the workflow. If you can't finish that project in 3 years, you have to apply for an extension, and that extension is heard not by staff, but by a hearing officer. And that hearing officer can extend it, provide 1 to 2 extensions up to 180 days each. So basically, the hearing officer can extend that project for 1 more year. And if that project does not finish in that 4th year, and that project needs more time, then they would have to apply for an extension at the city council. So that was the ordinance that was approved back 3 years ago. Well, what's happened? Well, COVID happened. COVID has disrupted the supply lines and impacted projects with delays. And I've made a list here, and we talked to some of the contractors, we talked to the suppliers, and trying to understand what are we still seeing today. So this is from least impactful to most impactful. So your general building materials, your lumber, your concrete, your copper, it's there, it's available. And I would let the council know that I checked the price of lumber today, and it's gone up 80% in the last year. So materials have skyrocketed, but we have materials. The next item that's impactful are your special order items. Here in Newport, when you build a home, you have big windows, ocean view, and so you need steel beams. We use a lot of steel in residential construction. Those are special orders, and so those are delayed. And those are delayed because of material sourcing or labor shortages. Next level of impact is your doors and windows. You can still get affordable windows at Lowe's, but in Newport, we get very high-end windows. And those windows, and we do have manufacturers here in California, and they are delayed because they can't get all the materials, plus they have staffing issues also. The biggest issue we're hearing now is appliances are on a big back order. You're looking at 1 year for very high-end appliances. Of course, you can still go to Lowe's, Best Buy, and order kind of more of the affordable appliances. But when you're looking at your Vikings, your Wolves, they're on extreme back order. All these are manageable. If you have a very good contractor that knows how to manage projects, to get ahead of this, work with the client and get this ordered, you can manage these projects. The problem that they're having now is skilled labor. So we've all heard about the Great Resignation. Well, it's affected the construction industry. It's very hard to find that skilled craftsman that does the woodwork, or skilled drywall or cabinet maker. That's a big struggle now, and that has thrown everybody off because there's a shortage of skilled labor, and that's driving costs too. Before, projects were taking 2 years. Now the projects are taking over 3 years if you manage the project well. So our solution, before I get to that. So from a number standpoint, what are we looking at? So this bar graph here shows that that we have about 75 projects that are coming due in that 3-year period. And so that bottom is number of years. In totality, you have 165 projects that are up against the deadline now. You still have some of those remnant projects that don't seem to ever finish. You got some in the 7, 8, 9-year mark. And these are projects that homeowners pay cash for. They may do it themselves. We've never regulated the time of completion because we didn't have anything on the books. Now, when you look at the books, we've got about 165 projects. So what are we proposing? So we propose that instead of those 3 boxes, we insert this 4th box in red, where the building official, which is now Tony Ty, he actually grants that first 1-year extension. And so the reason why we're asking the council for this amendment is we know there's a lot of projects that are not meeting the schedule due to COVID. Second, to hold a public hearing, it's a lot of work. It's public noticing, same as a planning commission. We have to do the noticing, we have to do the mailing, we have to charge the applicants up to about $1,600 to set up this public hearing. So there's a lot of city resources that goes into setting up these hearings, and we have 165 of them. We feel that it's appropriate to ask for the council to amend the ordinance and just grant that 1-year extension. Tony will be the decision maker on it. You can tell projects that are almost close to the finish line and those projects that are being dormant. If a project is dormant and it's not moving, there's no amount of time that you're going to give to finish it. In those cases, Mr. Ty can say, I'm not going to grant any extension, go to the hearing officer. So that discretion will be up to Mr. Ty to make. And then that extension is up to 365 days. If that project can't get completed, they have to go back in front. They go in front of a hearing officer for the 2nd and 3rd extension, then ultimately to the city council if they can't finish that project. And that is the amendment before you this evening.
Great. Councilwoman Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Simone. A couple of questions. If you would go back to the timeline chart, I think the previous chart. Yes, this. Yeah, these aging permits. So just current situation, even before COVID, looking at the 5 and 6 and 7 year, what are we doing about those properties? Are we enforcing the current ordinance?
So we are now, but before that, 3 years ago, we didn't have an ordinance. No,
but okay, in the last 3 years, we've had an ordinance, correct?
Right. So all of them were given a 3-year fresh start. So even if you're already 3 years, the ordinance gave them 3 additional years. And so now all of them are due. All of these in front of you are now due.
All right. Okay. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I support the concept of what you're doing. The only suggested change I would make, if there were to be a motion, I'll make a motion to support with this change, that your amendment sunsets in 2 years, or if the supply chain problem still exists, I'm sure a future council would extend it again. But I think we should go back to the original ordinance after the supply chain problems have been dealt with and have expired. I want to be sympathetic, but I prefer not to lock this in as an indefinite future strategy or ordinance. I think let's just get through. It's a unique situation with the supply chain. Let's get through that and then go back to the original intent of the ordinance. That would be I'll make a motion to amend the proposed ordinance amendment change.
Okay, so would you like to go ahead and make?
Yes, I'll move to support an amendment to the current ordinance with this exceptions to sunset in 2 years.
I'll second that.
Okay, great. Basically, staff report with a 2-year sunset. Yeah. Councilman Avery.
Yeah, I've been there. I think most of us haven't, and now it's so difficult. So I'm really reluctant, and I think this is great, very much needed, and probably in the nick of time to help these folks get their projects done for all the reasons you discussed. And things happen in people's lives when they get this far out, and it's so stressful to be trying to finish a house up. And as you get closer, it gets further away. It's a funny thing that happens, that last bit to get your permit. And so I'm all for this. And my only concern is sort of there's some real tough ones out there, and I know you know them, that are on those years 7, 8, and 9. And I don't know what we can do to get them to finish up, because there's really tough for the folks living around it to just have it keep going on, and sporadic noise and disruptions and then silence and going, and it's terrible. So whatever we can do, and I know you're doing it, is to try and get them to wrap up somehow, or try to get them off the books. But I think the people on the front end of this, they need just this help. Exactly. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
Thank you. Okay. So I know that sitting up here, we want to be able to say that there's going to be a stop to supply chain issues and labor shortages in 2 years, but I am not very confident in those facts. And I think that what staff's brought forward isn't a forever extension. It's that we've added another element so that Mr. Tai can look at these and say, you need an extra year. It's not an automatic. People aren't just given more time, but we've added an element where we can have someone in staff that knows how a building is working and look at it and say, this isn't being finished because of. And so putting an automatic sunset in really makes me nervous, because we're trying to predict the future up here and saying that everything is going to be cool in 2 years, and we're willing to make policy based on what we think the future will hold. And that just seems like bad policy to me. I think what we've brought forward is, let's let staff do what staff does. Let's let them look at a project and say, hey, this needs a little bit of an extension. And if staff doesn't think it needs an extension, then it goes through the process we already have in, where you can find another year. You can find that continuous extension if you need it, thank you, through the hearing with the hearing officer. I think the hard thing is right now that for us to sit here and say all of our troubles with supply chains and skilled labor are going to be better in 2 years is insane. I don't think we have more people coming out of welding school. I don't think there's more mill workers working. And I think that we're in a real bind. And, and I do speak from a personal element here that I'm constantly hiring contractors, and I'm constantly looking for woodworkers and welders, and they don't exist. And when you call an architect and ask them to give you a new set of plans and they don't get back to you in 2 weeks, and then they say it's going to be another 3 months before they're going to write them up again, and you're thinking, what? This is the opposite of what it was 10 years ago. This is real. And I think that what we're working for here is a system that gives us the ability to work through these problems. What I don't want to see is the council hamstring the system because we believe in a couple years everything is going to be great. I think we have to go off the assumption that today is today. And we can adjust these things in 2 years, or a future council can, if that's the deal. But why add a sunsetting clause to something that isn't hindering the city at all? This has nothing to do with us making more policy or adding a new element to this. We're just giving the ability so that we can get projects finished. And I think that's where I have a big problem with this. Construction's hard right now. I mean, there's no denying it. The fact that lumber is up where it is, what we budget 3 years ago towards what we have to pay now is a very different reality. And in 2 years, when maybe everything is perfect again, maybe, sure, then council can look at it at that point and say, hey, everything's great, let's pull this back. But right now, I don't see that. And I don't see the supply chain loosening up, and I don't see this getting easier or better, and I don't see more skilled labor coming out. And so I don't think that's good policy to say that we're going to end this because in the future it gets better. I think that's insanity.
About 3 years, we have a new administration.
Well, I'll go with 3 years, but let me just make a point. We have a lot of parties, stakeholders in a construction project, not only the property owner, you have neighbors. If Mr. Blum wasn't on the council when we made this policy 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whenever it was because of the problems that neighbors have with these projects going on and extending and causing disturbances in the neighborhood and the negative impacts. So this was intended to solve neighbor complaints and to put a sense of urgency in a construction project. Granted, we cannot predict the supply chain. I'd be willing to say 3 years. But regardless, the city council is going to be getting involved again. If it were in 3 years or in 2 years, it's going to come back to the city council just as it would be to update this policy. So the fact is we have residents who are concerned. There are streets in Newport Beach that have bumper-to-bumper construction projects going on, scraping properties. I see them every day. We all see them. You have more building permits underway than any time in our history. So there is a lot of building going on. We want to extend that completion time, of course, but I do not believe that we're creating hardships for anyone. If someone truly this is the city of Newport Beach. If truly somebody has a hardship case, I think they would be met with some sympathy at the staff level, at the ministerial level, or at the council level if need be. We're not trying to put anybody in a hardship condition. We're trying to balance the needs of the building industry, a worldwide supply chain issue, and neighborhood impacts, because the neighborhood impacts they exist. So I'd go with 3 years. I'd amend my motion for 3 years.
Councilman Brenner.
Simone, how many building permits do we have in the city of Newport Beach that are active right now?
Active, I want to say about 3,200 permits right now.
3,200. And I guess I would like your opinion on what is fair, because not only do we want to be fair to people who are actually experiencing problems in getting the materials and the workmen and that sort of thing, but we also want to be fair to the citizens who came to us before begging for relief from these projects that just go on forever. So, we can always bring this back after 2 or 3 years, however, and then say, the problems didn't clear up as quickly as we thought, and, we're going to need a little bit more time. But I don't want to be unfair to the people who are suffering through this at the same time that I don't want to be unfair to the people who are doing these projects. So what would your suggestion be?
This is a tough one as far as trying to predict how the future holds, and I don't want to step into this deliberation with the council at all. It's a tough one. I don't have a good feeling of how the supply lines are right now, and now we have energy costs skyrocketing. It's so hard to predict how this is all going to work out and when. I do think you have a fail-safe with this ordinance. Mr. Tai, you're granting him just up to a 1 year extension, and then after that they just go to the hearing officer, and there's going to be public hearings. So I think this proposal seems to work. If you want to sunset it or not sunset it, it's fine with staff.
Let me just add on to that question. So if we approve this with the 3 year sunset, and then you find that the problems lasted 2 additional years, you would just come back to us like tonight and ask us to extend that, correct?
We would. If the problems still persist or there's other issues, we would definitely come back.
And in addition to that, but we would still be sending the message that they need to complete their projects in a timely manner.
We do a lot of messaging when they obtain the permit. We do a lot of messaging when we do the inspections, so that we constantly message with them. Unfortunately, sometimes contractors change, sometimes properties get sold, but we are doing our part to ensure that they know there's a timeline on these projects.
Okay, thank you.
Let's hear what the public has to say. Public comments on this item, please come forward.
Mayor Muldoon, members of the council. I believe, as we've heard, when the council adopted the existing ordinance or scheme 3 years ago, that presumably it was a well-reasoned solution to the problem. I therefore support Councilmember Dixon's recommendation that when this temporary problem is relieved, that you go back to that well-reasoned solution that you adopted 3 years ago. I therefore support the idea of having a sunset clause in this. And my reason for that is if you have a sunset clause, as we heard, and things are not working out, in 3 years, the staff will come back to you and ask for an extension of that 3-year or 2-year or whatever it is, sunset. If you adopt this tonight with no sunset clause in it, I can guarantee you that 2 or 3 years from now, with probably different people sitting up here and possibly different staff, nobody is going to remember the intention of this council to go back to what we had adopted 3 years ago. The sunset clause will be sure you will be reminded. Without that, nobody will remember. But I would further point out that there is a procedure for adopting ordinances. They need to be clear what you're introducing, as I'm sure the city attorney was about to interject here. The language that you're adopting at introduction has to be well enough known that the clerk can post it and publish a notice of what you are proposing to adopt at the next meeting. And if it's not very simple to put the sunset clause in, the city attorney is going to have to rewrite this with it and introduce what you want at the next meeting so it can be published and people know what you're talking about. Thank you.
Jim, something tells me that in 2 years or 3 years' time, you'll be here to remind the next council what our intent was tonight. Other public comments, please come forward.
Members of the council, thank you. I'm Brian Jeanette, and I have quite a few projects here in construction in Newport Beach. And they are going through substantial delays, exactly what Noah had mentioned. We're seeing projects that we're ordering appliances before we do the design. Just getting the entitlements through the city processing also is timely. The city is so busy with new projects that the backlog that we're seeing is another consideration. I think what Councilman Dixon mentioned about extending it to 3 years is a reasonable place to start. And knowing that through Simone's office and Tony Ty's at the helm, that there will be constant looking at how to make sure that the people that are in those difficult situations, and I have one of those myself that you probably, it's on that 6-year list, I'm sure, and the complications with that, you could never consider, and nor would I have known. I'd like to get it done, and we now know that it's going to get done. So sometimes it takes a little bit of movement in one direction, but I think that 3 years does make sense, and the ability to bring it back to council or with staff look at it makes a lot of sense as well. So I would suggest that what Councilman Dixon said is a good way to go, and Councilman Bloom, I think you're right on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? Mayor Pro Tem Blum.
This is the last thing I have to say on this before I move on. Basically, what we're looking at here is giving someone an extension so that they don't have to pay another $1,600 to go back through this process again. I don't think that's in the detriment of anyone that's trying to finish a project. And so I am, as Jim said, why are we trying to rewrite an ordinance with another piece just so that we're clear that it'll sunset? We have to trust staff that they are going to make the right decisions for these. This isn't an automatic. We're not just granting 4 years on these projects. It's the same thing we already passed. This is that at staff's discretion, we're not going to charge people another $1,600 that are trying to finish. This is exactly what you wanted when you passed this initially. It's just we're now taking into consideration that the times have changed. And for us to sit up here and say that we're only going to do this if this, why? I build a decent amount of projects in this city as well, and it is hard. It is mind-boggling hard, and you spend way more money than you might have thought of 3 years ago. And sometimes you're at the mercy of everyone else, not yourself. And so I trust staff. They do an amazing job. They want you to finish. Everyone on that list in those couple of years beyond, they want to finish too, because they're not making a dollar. They're not selling their project. They're not opening their business, whatever it is. And I know these are for homes themselves, but sometimes I just feel like if everything needs a secondary piece to it, oh, we have to do this in order to approve this, we get into this insanity of we're just adding layers of bureaucracy on top of this. And the answer is we're sunsetting something with this idea that we're not going to need this anymore. We're not adding an extra year. That never came up. We're adding the ability to bypass a fee. And for those of you that have gone through this process, to go through and get a ruling from a zoning administrator, to go through and get to council, that's not a quick process. That's long. It takes months. It takes a huge amount of data and a huge amount more money, new plans and these new pieces to get in. And I'm fairly passionate about this because it's insane. I think when you are building something and your heart and soul is in it, and to know that there's people sitting up here that are dictating that it's easier if you just do it now or next year will be easier for you, it makes me crazy. Yeah, we don't want people constantly building next to our houses. I get it. The residents have spoken. You know what? Those same residents, their property values are going up. Those same transfer fees that have helped our budget in this city have gone up. We've made a great city because of it. We're not making a worse one. And we have so many projects in that these guys are working so hard to get these things done. Sometimes it takes more time. And we want to be the final word in when you should finish. It's not the reality. The reality is that stuff takes longer now. And I can't support anything that puts a sunset on this. I think it's insanity. I think that we should let the staff do their job. We should let Tony do what he's going to do and say, this, you guys are working hard to finish. You get a year. Let's finish it. You're not working hard to finish it. I'm not going to grant it. I mean, I think it's that simple. We're not going to charge you money. If you want to take it up the channel, you can pay the extra $1,600. You can take it through this next administration piece. This isn't like we're granting somebody a free ride. We're giving them the ability to finish a project in a hard climate. Even though we've decided we're done with the issues of COVID now, that's great. The supply chain isn't. Workers aren't. We don't have the staffs we need. And from the business side, we're still struggling every day to try to get these things done, to try to push these projects forward, to trying to get an architect to sign off on something. And so standing up here and adding asterisks to everything, I just can't agree with them. I think it just adds some more bureaucracy, and I'm just not for that.
I just want to make one final comment. With this change, proposed amendment, it really is changing the original intent of the original ordinance. The original ordinance was to put a 3-year time, start to finish, on a project. Obviously, external factors have made that difficult, so we want to create an extension to that. And then if the pandemic, God help us, or the effects of it are still existing, we have ability to extend it. But to add this additional 1 year on a permanent basis changes the original intent of the ordinance, where the people and the council said we listen to the people and we want to protect our neighborhood impacts. It's that simple. There's always relief on the other end. Let's just respect the original ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. I think everyone knows how they feel. Councilor Brenner.
I just wanted to say that I think that the majority of our property owners and our contractors and our architects, like Brian, are similar to Noah in that they are anxious to get projects done. They're anxious to start operating. If they're a business, they're anxious to start living in the house if they're a property owner. This ordinance came about because there are some real egregious examples of people who have not done that. And we had no ability to really monitor that or force anything to happen. And people that lived next door to them just were going crazy. I mean, I want the project next door to me to be finished as quickly as possible. I don't even call if they work on Saturday and Sunday because I want them to finish as quickly as possible. And I think that's how most people are. But we needed this ordinance because there were quite a few examples of projects that were not progressing, were not being finished in any, and they really did decrease the property value of the places next door to them because those people were living with construction vehicles there 24/7. So this seems like a good compromise, and it's not like we're going to be so rigid that we're going to punish anyone that is actually trying to complete their project. Thank you.
Thank you. Call the vote.
Prior to reading the vote, I'll read the ordinance title for ordinance 2022-8, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach, Councilmember Avery, amending section 15.2.95 of the Newport Beach Municipal Code authorizing an extension of the time limit to complete construction for an additional year. The motion carries 5-2 with Mayor Pro Tem Blom and Mayor Muldoon voting no.
Thank you. Any, Madam Clerk, motion for reconsideration.
A motion to reconsider the vote on any action taken by the City Council of either this meeting or the previous meeting may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
Any motions to reconsider? I think I'd like to reconsider the two most contentious. That tonight we are adjourning in memory of an individual that Councilmember O'Neill is going to acknowledge, and then I'll adjourn. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a moment.
Take your time.
Tonight we adjourn in the memory of Carol Fracolosi, born on November 22nd, 1946. Carol Fracolosi would eventually graduate from Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington, and later receive her graduate degree in physical therapy from Cal State Long Beach. On December 27, 1970, at 4:27 p.m., and yes, Leo, her husband, gave me the exact time, she met her future husband, Leo, at the Yodeler Inn in Mammoth, California. A little over 2 years later, she proposed to Leo in front of the laundromat in Corona del Mar on PCH. They were married 3 months later and subsequently bought their first house in CDM in 1974. They then welcomed into the world sons Brian, Jeffrey, and twins David and Scott. In 1982, she formed a playgroup of moms and kids that still meet to this day. In 1985, she opened her first physical therapy clinic, which has grown to 40 employees today. She is survived by her husband, Leo, her children, and 6 beautiful grandchildren.
Thank you. We are adjourned.